Chapter 619. After arranging everything on Huangli Island, he sent voice transmissions to several of his good friends, asking them to take care of Huangli Island while he was away. Then, he said to Hu Lily, "I've already discussed it with Marshal Uncle Guatianshan. When you advance to the mid-stage core forging realm, you can invite him to Huangli Island to use the art of moving and filling the sea again to expand Huangli Island. Currently, Huangli Island has a circumference of 20 to 30 li, but it's still considered a small island. This time, we must expand it to a small island with a circumference of more than 50 li." Hu Lily asked worriedly, "Do you really have to go to the Central Plains?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "I'm really in a hurry this time. This time, I found an opportunity, but it's not just me. If I want to go to the Central Plains before others, I have to go to the Central Plains. Moreover, going to the Central Plains cultivation world has always been my wish. I want to go to that place that is said to represent the highest level of cultivation in the cultivation world. After all, the North Sea is still too small." Hu Lily sighed sadly and said, "It's a pity that I'm not strong enough. I can't help you much." "Why can't you help me?" Lu Ping said seriously, "Huangli Island is my foundation. It can even be said that it's a way out for myself. You've worked so hard to manage it all these years. This is a great help to me." Hu Lily was a shrewd person after all. A hint of sadness flashed through her eyes. She thought for a moment and said, "Don't forget about those two brats. That Wang Qi was sent to chop firewood at the back of Tianling Mountain. It's said that he was tortured by Du Feng. Now, he's following Du Feng to hunt demonic beasts overseas. That Tianyu, whom you placed in the Pill Pavilion, is said to be a talented fourth-generation alchemist. He's highly regarded by the Pill Pavilion's new alchemist, Master Xin Fong." Hu Lily paused for a moment before continuing, "There are also 5 other disciples who have seen you practice. I heard that their cultivations aren't low either. They have all advanced to the late blood condensation realm and were accepted by the sect's core forging realm's 3rd-generation disciples. They are considered the best among the 4th-generation disciples." When Hu Lily saw Lu Ping's nonchalant expression, she couldn't help but agitate him. "I see that all your hard work has gone to someone else. Forget about those 5 disciples. But that Wang Qi, junior brother Du Feng, has come to me several times to ask if you still want to accept him as your disciple. If you don't accept him, he will accept him. You should know that Wang Qi cultivates the metal element sword technique, which is very compatible with junior brother Du Feng's sword technique. Junior brother Du Feng is a man of few words, but he has asked me several times. It seems like he really wants to accept Wang Qi." Lu Ping replied nonchalantly, "Don't worry. Senior brother Du won't accept him as a disciple. He's just trying to provoke me, just like you, to make me accept Wang Qi as a disciple as soon as possible." "Then why did you?" "Hee. Swordsmanship isn't something that can be learned by following seniors, and it can't be trained by killing beasts either. Why are sword cultivators known as the best in the cultivation world? It's because swordsmanship requires the most spirituality. How do you make your swordsmanship, flying swords, and divine arts linked to the spirit? What is the spirit of all living things in this world? These are all things that a true sword cultivator should consider. After all, the path of a sword cultivator has to rely on oneself to succeed." Lu Ping paused for a moment, then said, "Tell Wang Qi what I said. Then ask him to go to the East Sea's Soundwave Island and find Qi Lianying. Tell him that I told him to come to the East Sea to train and practice his swordsmanship." Hu Lily blinked her eyes. Although she was not a sword cultivator, she had been with Lu Ping for a long time, so she had some understanding of swordsmanship. After a moment of hesitation, she asked, "You're not asking him to kill people, are you? Which sword cultivator doesn't kill people like flies?" Lu Ping paused for a moment, then said, "I just want to see if he can walk this path." "What about Tianyu? That kid has my token. Who in the entire Elixir Pavilion would dare to take him as a disciple? Who would dare to make things difficult for him?" After a pause, Lu Ping added, "Even the Fornax and Tianqin Laozu wouldn't dare." Although Hu Lily was surprised by Lu Ping's words, she did not know that her Dao companion was now the 3rd alchemist in Zhenling, so she continued, "But you really should take in a disciple or two. Previously, when junior brother Zhang Xuanqing visited Huangli Island, he would always bring Uncle Master Xuanyuan's message urging you to take in a disciple. Now, among the 3rd-generation disciples in the sect, Your cultivation is the highest, your strength is the most profound, and you are the most famous, but you don't have a single disciple. If this goes on for too long, I'm afraid Uncle Master Lu Tianling will also blame you." Lu Ping was stunned for a moment. Only then did he remember what his master said when he saw the cloudy light multicolored robe in the true spirit palace that day. Taking the cloudy light multicolored robe as the inheritance of Zhonghua lineage to protect the future disciples. Wasn't this also hinting that he should take in a disciple to inherit his legacy? It seems that I really should take in a few disciples, but it's not that easy to become my disciple. Seeing that Lu Ping had this thought, Hu Lily no longer urged him, but instead said, "With your current identity and status, you naturally have to be very careful when taking in disciples." After saying goodbye to Hu Lily, who was standing in front of the cave residence to send him off, Lu Ping could not help but look back. With his magical vision, he could naturally see that Hu Lily was still looking at him from the entrance of the cave residence. Lu Ping sighed in his heart and thought to himself, "It seems that she's going to have a baby. It's not good to leave her alone to look after the house like this." Hundreds of miles below the sea surface outside of Huanyu Island, after the teleportation array incident with AOU, this place was occupied by the Monster Clan. Although the cultivators of the North Sea organized several attacks on the Monster Clan, and although the Monster Clan suffered heavy casualties, they still firmly occupied this area of the sea. The various sects of the North Sea also suspected that the Monster Clan had discovered some secret in this area, and there were even human Dharma adepts who sneaked in to investigate, but in the end, they found nothing. Although the various sects were puzzled, they could only send people to monitor and report immediately if anything happened. The jade water moon pearl, the ocean crossing boat, the colorful cloud-light robe, the stone armor, and on top of that, Lu Ping's exquisite water-based cultivation method. If he wanted to sneak into the sea, even early Dharma adepts would find it difficult to find him. "Brother Zhang, do you know why we are stationed here? This place is so close to the human territory, and we are often attacked by the human race. Countless of our brothers have died, but we have never seen a mountain of gold or silver here." Brother Wu, you're really funny. Even if there is a mountain of gold or silver, you want it? That's just a common thing for mortals. What use do we have for it? I just don't understand. What do you think there is in this place? We are a lone army in deep waters, and every time we rely on the lives of our brothers to barely defend this part of the sea. I don't know who came up with such a bad idea. If I, Wu Shan, become Lao Zu, I will definitely have a talk with him. You? Brother Wu, it's not that I want to discourage you, but the one who came up with this idea was AOU of the Ice Dragon clan. Let's not talk about whether you can become a Dharma adept. Even if you become Lao Zu, would you dare to find trouble with that guy AOU? He has already condensed a high-level golden elixir, and it is said that he has already broken through to the Dharma stage. By the time you become a Dharma adept, he will probably have already passed the tribulation and reached the mid-Dharma stage. Even if he can't reach it, Brother Wu, at the same level, would you be a match for the Ice Dragon clan? What's so great about that? AOU still says that his clan is a top demon clan, but he is not alone. The Ice Dragon clan is about to be wiped out by him. Brother Wu, don't talk nonsense. AOU is now a popular person in front of all the Lao Zu, but it's just a suggestion from him, and we brothers are going to defend this part of the sea with our lives. Isn't that enough to explain the problem? Hey, speaking of which, you really don't know why we are guarding this place. Who knows? There are rumors that there are ancient relics hidden here, and the relics are about to be unearthed. There are also rumors that the Earth meridians here are special, and there may be a time when a large spiritual meridian will be born, and so on. In short, these rumors are everywhere. But as you can see, there are at least 2 Lao Zu leading us to guard this place. Although there are always changes, there are 2 Lao Zu, one in the mid-Dharma stage and the other in the early Lao Zu stage. Isn't this enough to explain the problem? Behind the 2 patrolling core forging demon cultivators, an invisible stream of water flowed for a moment, then disappeared. Lu Ping avoided the eyes and ears of the demon clan guarding this area, and slowly approached the underwater mountain range where he had discovered the clear stream cave abode. Many years had passed, and although the cave at the entrance of the clear stream cave abode was well hidden, he didn't know if the demon clan had already discovered it. Lu Ping remembered that the demon clan had secretly set up camp here because he had helped Yin Xinshu escape the sect's pursuit and wanted to use the Clear Stream Cave Abode's transportation formation to go to the Middle Lands. Unexpectedly, he ran into the demon clan's hiding place and had no choice but to give up on the trip to the Middle Lands. He had thought that after the various sects of the North Sea discovered that the demon clan was stationed here, they would definitely sweep through the demon clan with lightning speed. This place was too close to Universe Island, and how could they allow outsiders to sleep next to their bed? Unexpectedly, after several years, the North Sea Demon Clan still firmly occupied this part of the sea. Aou was from the Ice Dragon Clan, and the Ice Dragon Clan had an inheritance pearl. Could there really be some secret buried here? Lu Ping had his suspicions, but now was not the time to think about such things in a dangerous place. After avoiding many patrolling Demon Clan cultivators along the way, Lu Ping finally arrived at the hidden cave where the Clear Stream Cave Abode was located. After investigating the waters around the cave, he discovered that there were no Demon Clan members nearby, and the mark he'd left behind was still there. This meant that the Demon Clan hadn't discovered this place yet. Lu Ping couldn't help but sigh in relief. However, Lu Ping still didn't dare to be careless. After opening up the huge rock outside the cave, he carefully put it back in its original place. Only then did Lu Ping continue slowly toward the cave abode. Chapter 620. Following the cavern tunnel, Lu Ping walked all the way to the spacious hall where they had found the underground abode all those years ago. Back then, before the underground abode was discovered, the protective formation of the Qingjian cave was still in operation, and the seawater was kept out of the hall. Now that the protective formation had collapsed, the entire Qingjian cave had been flooded by seawater. When Lu Ping had first arrived here, he had been puzzled as to why there were so many fragments of ritual implements in the hall. After receiving Qingjian Laozu's inheritance, he found out that Qingjian Laozu must have triggered the tribulation of the early Dharma stage when he was seriously injured. Only then did he suddenly realize that Qingjian Laozu had failed to pass the tribulation in the hall, and his protective ritual implements had been destroyed by the lightning tribulation. It was only after Lu Ping had witnessed the process of Laozu's tribulation that he realized that practitioners could not rely on ritual implements to pass the tribulation. They could only rely on their own inner yuan, spells, powers, and physical strength to withstand the tribulation. Otherwise, it would interfere with the process of the tribulation and make things worse for the practitioner. Lu Ping then realized that the countless fragments of the ritual implements in the hall were not destroyed by the lightning tribulation. Instead, they were destroyed by the residual power of the lightning tribulation after Qingjian Laozu had failed to pass the tribulation. This was also the reason why Qingjian Laozu had given his storage implements and the few treasures that he had inherited from Zhenling to Lu Ping in advance when he thought that he would not be able to survive the last two lightning tribulations of the mid-Dharma stage. He was afraid that if Qingjian Laozu failed to pass the tribulation, not only would he die, but the items that he had brought with him would also be damaged by the residual power of the lightning tribulation. However, at this time, Lu Ping was not in a hurry to rush to the Qingjian cave through the underground tunnel of the hall. Instead, he was patrolling the hall in the middle of the mountain, as if looking for something. Since Patriarch Clearstream was a cultivator of the Ying-Tian sect, he was lucky enough to escape after the Ying-Tian sect was annihilated. He rushed to the North Sea to seek refuge with Fei Ling sect, but he didn't expect that Fei Ling sect would be annihilated almost at the same time. Helpless, he was invited by the Azure Sea sect, who had secretly seen through his background, and became their honored guest. The Songhai sect wanted to obtain the inheritance treasures of the Ying-Tian sect and the Fei Ling sect from him, but unexpectedly, they failed to steal the chicken and ended up losing the rice. Not only did Qingjian Laozu escape from the Songhai sect, but not long after Qingjian Laozu escaped from the Songhai sect, the flowing sword of the thin water flowing sword, a pair of flying swords passed down by the founder of the Songhai sect, was also stolen. Originally, the Songhai sect thought that Laozu had stolen the flowing sword and joined forces with the cultivators of the sect to suppress him. Unexpectedly, they had no evidence, and under Qingjian Laozu's meticulous plan, they had angered the cultivators of the North Sea. In the end, they had only seriously injured Qingjian Laozu. During this period of time, the Songhai sect had been secretly taken advantage of by Lao Tzu. He had snuck into the Songhai sect and forcefully taken the thin water sword, causing the Songhai sect to become the laughingstock of the North Sea cultivation world. As a result, the Songhai sect had split up. Although Qingjian Laozu had many alibis at the time to prove that he was not the one who stole the flowing sword, Lu Ping had always believed that the flowing sword of the Azure Sea sect was actually stolen by Qingjian Laozu. Especially after knowing that Laozu was actually a disciple of the Yingtian sect, Lu Ping was even more convinced of his own judgment. He even suspected that this was a tacit cooperation between Qingjian Laozu and Laozu. Of course, as the person involved and the victim, the Songhai sect naturally believed it. Unfortunately, the Songhai sect, which was already in internal strife, had no time to care about Qingjian Laozu. Qingjian Laozu seemed to be quite tactful and quickly disappeared from the North Sea cultivation world. In fact, it was because after being injured by Laozu of the Songhai sect, there was almost no hope of recovery. Disheartened, he built the Qingjian cave abode at the bottom of the sea and lived in seclusion. Lu Ping's current divine sense cultivation, eyesight, and insight were no longer the same as when he first entered the Qingjian cave abode. Lu Ping walked around the hall and finally looked at the core of the abandoned waterproof formation in the middle of the hall. Lu Ping walked to the core of the formation and suddenly stomped down. With a muffled dong, it seemed like the entire mountain began to shake. However, Lu Ping seemed to be unaware of it. He raised his foot and stomped down again. Dong! The ground creaked like a spider web with the core of the formation as the center. It seemed like the entire mountain was about to collapse. However, Lu Ping did not look worried at this time. Instead, his face showed surprise. A cold light like autumn water flashed in the cracked core of the formation. Lu Ping raised his foot and stomped down for the third time. Amidst the clanging sound, a 3-foot-long sword hung upside down from the ground, and Lu Ping grabbed it in his hand. Amidst the clanging sound, the long sword vibrated violently in Lu Ping's hand like a stream of water, trying to break free from Lu Ping's grasp. However, how could Lu Ping let it do as it wished at this time? Suddenly, a rich bluish-purple Zhen Yuan rose in his hand, resolving the huge force brought by the vibration of the long sword. At the same time, the bluish-purple Zhen Yuan went straight into the long sword, intending to completely refine and subdue this flying sword. The long sword was still trembling. However, when Lu Ping's bluish-purple Zhen Yuan wrapped around it, the long sword seemed to suddenly show a feeling of fear. The violent trembling was no longer to break free from Lu Ping's control, but instead seemed to be afraid of something. However, although the long sword could no longer resist Lu Ping's control, it still stubbornly resisted the invasion of Lu Ping's Zhen Yuan. It seemed to know that once this bluish-purple Zhen Yuan invaded, it would lose its freedom again. Humph! A mere sword spirit dares to resist? As a famous sword spirit, it should fight for the world. If you continue to resist my Zhen Yuan refinement, I will seal you again, and we will talk about it again after 4,000 or 5,000 years of darkness. If you surrender to me, I will make you a famous sword spirit in the world. What do you think? Lu Ping's divine sense wrapped around the entire long sword, and Lu Ping's thoughts were transmitted to the long sword over and over again. Perhaps Lu Ping's vigorous Zhen Yuan broke through the resistance of the long sword, or perhaps Lu Ping's words were recognized by the long sword, but Lu Ping felt that the Zhen Yuan in his hand, which was originally blocked outside, suddenly seemed to flow into a bottomless pit. However, Lu Ping's quintessential essence was extremely abundant. After the first wave of quintessential essence flowed into the sword, another wave of quintessential essence flowed into the sword through his bloodline that was like an endless river. The long sword trembled violently again. This time, it was not resistance, not fear, but excitement. At this moment, Lu Ping finally received the long sword's recognition, and it was completely refined by Lu Ping. Lu Ping held the long sword horizontally, and on the back of the sword were 2 ancient characters, flowing flow. It really was the flowing sword. The pair of flying swords used by Lao Tzu, the founder of the Blue Sea sect, were collectively known as the thin water flowing sword. Perhaps this pair of flying swords were not the top magic treasures in the Blue Sea sect, but they were the symbol of the Blue Sea sect's magic treasures. Their status in the Blue Sea sect was not lower than any of the magic treasures. Lu Ping casually threw the flowing sword into the air. As he controlled the flying sword, he familiarized himself with the characteristics of the flying sword. With a flick of his long sleeves, the soil that covered the teleportation formation was lifted up, and the teleportation formation that was buried in the sea soil reappeared in front of Lu Ping. After carefully examining the teleportation formation and making sure that it was not damaged, Lu Ping embedded 12 upper-grade spirit stones on the edge of the teleportation formation. He suddenly activated the teleportation formation, but he had already retreated from the teleportation formation. With a hum, the teleportation formation flashed with a faint light, and the 12 upper-grade spirit stones all exploded. However, Lu Ping showed a happy expression. The teleportation formation needs both ends to be unobstructed. This test proves that the teleportation formation at the destination is also undamaged, so I can activate it without worry. Lu Ping flipped his palm, and a simple and unadorned spirit stone appeared in Lu Ping's hand. After Celestial Phenomenon Laozu's reward and the battle on Frost Island, the number of top-grade spirit stones in Lu Ping's hands had increased again. At this time, he already had almost 20 of them. However, to him, every time he used one, he would have one less. If it wasn't for the fact that he needed a top-grade spirit stone to activate the teleportation formation to Middle-earth, he would definitely not be willing to use it. After embedding the top-grade spirit stone into the center of the teleportation formation disk, Lu Ping embedded another 36 upper-grade spirit stones along the outside of the disk to form a circle. Lu Ping took a deep breath and looked back in the direction of Huangli Island for some reason. Then, he decisively activated the teleportation formation. A white light instantly appeared from the teleportation formation. Then, the light became brighter and brighter, and gradually, Lu Ping's figure was completely submerged in the light. The white light lasted for about 10 minutes before slowly dying out. At this time, Lu Ping's figure could no longer be seen in the teleportation formation. Only the sea soil around the teleportation formation and the sky fell down again, covering the teleportation formation disk with a thick layer of sea soil, as if nothing had happened. Chapter 621. A thin layer of twilight snow covered the vast land, and the bleak cold wind whistled across the land, rolling up countless snowflakes as if raising a layer of white mist. Lu Ping stood in the wilderness and took a deep breath. A piercing chill rose from his nose straight to his brain, making Lu Ping's spirit suddenly become extremely light. Is this the winter in Middle-earth? Lu Ping gazed into the distance. The vast wilderness stretched as far as the eye could see, but there was no trace of human beings. He had been here for 7 days, and he had explored more than 100 miles around the teleportation array. However, within 100 miles, Lu Ping did not find any trace of human gathering. Instead, there were many traces of beasts and even demonic cultivators. He had never seen such a vast land. In the North Sea, the largest island was said to be Xianling Sec's Xianling Island, which was only 800 miles in circumference, while Jinling's true Spirit Island was only 700 miles in circumference. Although Lu Ping had only carefully explored the area of 100 miles, he could still see the vast land, wilderness, and mountains hundreds of miles away. If it were overseas, this area would have already exceeded the rarely seen giant islands, and the giant islands Lu Ping himself had seen were only the sunken Fei Ling Island and the East Sea Northern Alliance's Qinyuan Island and a few other islands. After another fruitless search, Lu Ping turned around and fled in the opposite direction. 100 miles south of this vast wilderness was a continuous mountain range. Lu Ping had also explored the mountain range, but he only went 100 miles deep before he found traces of high-grade demonic cultivators. Lu Ping did not want to alert the enemy, so he returned to the border between the mountain range and the wilderness. Not far into the mountain range, Lu Ping's escape light fell straight into a canyon with a mountain stream of unknown origin. The escape light went against the direction of the canyon until it came to a cliff with towering mountains on both sides, as if it had been split by a giant axe. The mountain stream surged and slapped against the cliff, making a sizzling sound. When the mountain stream receded a little, The escape light went directly into the bottom of the cliff and disappeared in the blink of an eye. At the bottom of the cliff was a wide underground cave, and on the periphery of the cave was a large piece of rock hanging down from the top, just covering the cave. No one would have thought that there would be such a secret place at the bottom of the flowing water of the cliff. The escape light dissipated after entering the cave. Lu Ping strode deeper into the cave. When he came to a stone wall at the bottom of the cave, Lu Ping made a few hand seals and disappeared into the stone wall. After passing through the stone wall, Lu Ping entered a vast underground stone hall of nearly 100 feet. The fluorescent stones inlaid on the surrounding stone walls exuded a misty white light, illuminating the stone hall as if it was daytime. The rich aura filled the entire stone hall. It seemed that there was at least a medium-sized spiritual vein under this cave stone hall. At the edge of the stone hall, there were several stone rooms. There were stone tables and stone chairs in the stone rooms. At this time, Samling, Debao, Lu Qiner, and Lu Dague, the 6 monster pets, each occupied a stone room. In front of each of them were a few jade slips and a few sets of paper books. They were either holding the jade slips to check the information in them, or flipping through the paper books, scratching their ears and scratching their cheeks to figure out something. Seeing Lu Ping coming in, everyone cheered like a swarm of bees. The jade slips and books in their hands were thrown aside and ran towards Lu Ping. Even Lu Dague, who had always been honest and obedient, also had a relieved expression after seeing Lu Ping return. Lu Ping said with a fierce face, "What, do you understand all these things?" All the monster pets retreated in embarrassment. Lu Ping snorted coldly and said, "Before you all advanced to the core forging stage, you were still in the form of a monster. Although you had spiritual wisdom, you didn't understand the ways of the world. Now that you have advanced to the transformation stage, what's the difference between you and the human race?" Lu Ping paused. Seeing that all the monsters lowered their heads and had learned expressions, his face did not relax in the slightest. He still said in a deep voice, "Books can increase wisdom. The demon race is born with a tyrannical body and a longer lifespan than the human race. Even the swallowing of heaven and earth's spiritual chi is an instinct. Why can the human race stand side by side with the demon race? Even the wilderness of the Central Plains is occupied by the human race, while the demon race can only stand in such a harsh place as the mountains and swamps. The fundamental reason lies in the wisdom of the human race. But where does wisdom come from? Other than innate wisdom, it comes from these inherited ancient books." Lu Ping saw that all the monsters began to listen to his heart. His tone relaxed a little, but he still solemnly said, "These ancient books should have been brought out by Qingjin Laozu from the Yingtian sect's dojo after the destruction of the Yingtian sect. Although it is not a drop in the ocean of the Yingtian sect's inheritance, for any cultivator, it is a precious treasure. I will bring these ancient books back to the sect in the future. You all should take this opportunity to study them. It will be of great benefit to your future cultivation." All the monster pets obediently returned to their respective stone rooms. They picked up the jade slips or books again and began to study the ancient books of the Yingtian sect left behind by Qingjin Laozu. At the other end of the stone hall was the largest stone room. This was Lu Ping's temporary secret cultivation room. The medium spirit vein in the stone hall was also imprisoned under this stone room. In the center of the stone room was an ultra-long distance teleportation array. 7 days ago, after Lu Ping left the teleportation array of the Qingjian cave abode, he reappeared in this stone room. Lu Ping sat cross-legged on the stone bed in the stone room. On a stone table beside the stone bed, there was a small incense burner fixed on the stone table. This small stone incense burner was the imprisonment magic treasure of the medium spirit vein under the stone room. It was also the core of a concealment array in the stone hall. This was obviously a secret cave abode operated by Qingjin Laozu in the Middle Earth. From the harvest in the cave abode, the dojo of the Yingtian sect must be hidden in the area near this secret cave abode. However, in the past 7 days, Lu Ping had searched the area within 100 miles of the cave abode but found nothing. Lu Ping originally thought that Qingjin Laozu must know the location of the hidden dojo of the Yingtian sect. In that case, the teleportation array built in the cave abode that led to the Middle Earth must not be too far from the hidden dojo of the Yingtian sect. It might even lead directly to the dojo. In reality, from the harvest Lu Ping obtained in this cave abode, the dojo of the Ying Tian sect could indeed be hidden nearby. However, with Lu Ping's current cultivation and divine power, he obviously could not find the location of the dojo. Thinking about it, it made sense. The Ying Tian sect had been destroyed for thousands of years, and the dojo was hidden in the void. In these thousands of years, it must have attracted countless cultivators from the Middle Earth to search for it. However, no one had found the location of the dojo. From this, it could be seen how mysterious the Ying Tian sect's void concealment array was. Tian Shuelaozu once said that the Ying Tian sect's protective array did not specialize in defense, but in concealment. Its level of profoundness was comparable to the North Sea's Seven Stars cave abode. From the looks of it, it was true. After thinking about it, Lu Ping could only place his hopes on the ancient records of the Ying Tian sect that he found in the cave abode. He hoped that he could find some clues about the dojo of the Ying Tian sect from these ancient records. However, even though there were not many ancient records in the cave abode, the content was extremely vast. Without a choice, Lu Ping released all 6 of his spiritual pets and allowed them to study these ancient records. At the same time, he searched for any records related to the Ying Tian sect's dojo. As for Lu Ping, he would occasionally go out to investigate the surroundings of the cave abode. Even though he knew that the chances of finding anything were slim, Lu Ping still persisted in investigating the surrounding 100 kilometers. Lu Ping's divine will entered his storage artifact. First, he took out 4 spirit-gathering pearls, 1 big and 3 small. These were the small spirit-gathering pearls that Lu Ping had found in the mid-sized spirit vein of the cave abode by De Bao the moment he arrived at the cave abode. After that, Lu Ping took out 3 purple jade scrolls that were glowing with spiritual light from his storage ring. His hands formed a few spirit-dispersing arts, and after dispelling the restrictions on the jade scrolls, Lu Ping's divine will entered them and began to investigate the contents of the jade scrolls. These 3 jade scrolls recorded 3 sets of inherited techniques from the Ying Tian sect. These 3 sets of inherited techniques recorded the entire process of training from the blood condensation realm to the late Dharma stage. As of now, there were only 6 complete sets of inherited techniques in the Jinling sect. Furthermore, one of them was not even considered a true inherited technique. The rules of the Jinling sect were rather unique. For a set of techniques to be on the same level as a technique that could not be passed down, the practitioner had to train this set of techniques to the late Dharma stage. This was also why, when sage Liang Xianfeng had obtained the Linhai wave listening technique from the Zhongshuan cave abode in the East Sea and perfected Lu Tianling's and Lao Zu's training technique, the Linhai wave listening technique was still unable to become the 6th true inherited technique of the Jinling sect. Even so, if Lu Ping brought these 3 sets of techniques back to the Jinling sect, they would definitely be stored away by the Laozu sect. Then, they would begin to select the most outstanding blood condensation stage adepts from the sect to train with them. A complete set of training techniques would always be the foundation of a sect's legacy. The legacy of the Jinling sect had been passed down for tens of thousands of years, but there were only 5 complete sets of true inherited techniques up to the late Dharma stage. This was one of the main reasons that restricted the growth of the Jinling sect. Legend had it that a truly large sect would establish a complete set of inherited techniques. The complete set of inherited techniques had to cover all 7 bloodlines and 7 elements. There had to be at least 49 complete sets of complete inherited techniques up to the late Dharma stage. This meant that no matter what bloodline or element the disciple had, they would be able to find the best training technique that was suitable for them. Although the large sects could not be as perfect as the large sects, at the very least, they had to cover all 7 bloodlines and 7 attributes at the same time. Even if they were not suitable, they had to make sure that their disciples had at least 1 or 2 complete legacy cultivation techniques as a reference. Compared to the Jinling sect, the 5 complete sets of inherited techniques seemed unusually shabby. However, with these 3 sets of inherited techniques, in addition to Lu Tianling's complete Linhai wave listening technique, the Jinling sect would have at least 9 complete sets of inherited techniques. Although it still would not be able to cover all 7 elements and 7 bloodlines, it was at least one step closer to the standard of a large sect. Chapter 622. Lu Ping took out a wooden box carved with second-class spiritual materials from his storage ring. He removed the spirit sealing restriction spell on the surface of the box. More than half of the box was inside. There were 31 pieces in total. Lu Ping had found them next to the incense burner on the stone table when he had just been teleported to the stone room. This incense was called the Calming Soul Incense. It was made with several precious spices. It was a famous luxury in the world of practitioners. It was considered a luxury because, as far as Lu Ping knew, one of the materials used to make incense was the powder of the soul-nurturing wood, a mid-grade mystic class wood element spiritual object of the universe. Lu Ping had a piece of soul-nurturing wood with him. It was the spirit-forging pill Lu Ping had obtained from Mount Feiling. He had given it to the school and begged Reverend Jiang Xinlin to get it for him. Compared to the spirit-forging pill, the soul-nurturing wood wasn't worth mentioning at all. However, Lu Ping was only a minor repairs in the early stage of the blood condensation realm. Even if the school wanted to increase the reward, he didn't dare ask for it. Besides, because of the spirit-forging pill, the most outstanding second-generation disciples of Xinling had helped him a lot. Reverend Jiang Xinlin had even introduced him to Reverend Lu Xinlin and made him the 9th disciple of Chenghua Mansion. Although the soul-nurturing wood was no longer of interest to Lu Ping, he didn't want to use it to make something as luxurious as the Calming Soul Incense. Moreover, Lu Ping had used the soul-nurturing wood to practice the soul-splitting secret technique for almost 20 years. Originally, Lu Ping had thought that the spiritual object wouldn't be of much use to him after he mastered the secret technique. However, after Lu Ping had obtained the inheritance of his clone, he discovered that the spiritual object, which had been imbued with his own energy, was an indispensable material for refining a clone. As a result, the soul-nurturing wood became Lu Ping's treasure again. Lu Ping had only seen this kind of incense at his teacher Lu Tianling's Dharma manifestation ceremony. According to Reverend Li Xuanru, it was the leftovers of Jiang Tianlin Laozu's Dharma manifestation ceremony. Back then, Lu Ping had used amethyst honey to make top-grade spirit tea. When Tianlu Laozu found out about it, he repeatedly scolded him for being extravagant. However, the difference between amethyst honey tea and calming soul incense was like heaven and earth. If Lu Ping had something as precious as the calming soul incense, it could only be the top-grade spirit tea brewed by Lu Ping with amethyst royal jelly at Lu Tianling Laozu's Dharma manifestation ceremony. It was said that after Tianling Laozu's Dharma manifestation ceremony ended, she was angrily blocked by Tianlu Laozu. In the end, she promised to refine 5 batches of pills for Tianling Laozu. However, the condition was that Tianling Laozu had to hand over all the royal jelly that Lu Ping had given her to the pill pavilion to be used for refining pills. Only then did she return to the pill pavilion with satisfaction. The biggest effect of the calming soul incense was that when a cultivator was cultivating, it could allow the cultivator to fully immerse himself in cultivation as quickly as possible. It could clear his mind and improve his understanding of cultivation methods and divine abilities during the process of cultivation without being distracted by external factors. In addition, the calming soul incense was also very effective in nurturing and restoring a cultivator's divine sense. Lu Ping put a piece of calming soul incense into the stone incense burner and then slowly baked it with the blue spiritual fire. After a while, a deep and distant fragrance slowly came out of the incense burner and then filled the entire stone room. Lu Ping's divine sense quickly calmed down in the verification and analysis of the 3 sets of cultivation methods. The fragrance continued to spread throughout the entire cave. The 6 spiritual pets who were originally sitting there and trying to figure out the inheritance ancient books of the Ying Tian sect because of Lu Ping's request seemed to suddenly have some understanding and quieten down a lot. Lu Ping had obtained a lot of ancient books in this secret cave of Laozu in the clear stream. In addition to the most important and most complete set of 10,000 sets of inheritance ancient books, there were also 5 sets of other ancient books for cultivation up to the Dharma manifestation stage. In addition, there were many inheritance ancient books about alchemy, weapon forging, talisman making, and so on. Although they were scattered, they were also all-inclusive. As Lu Ping forced his spiritual pets to read these inheritance ancient books, he also hoped that they would organize these scattered ancient books. Most of the contents recorded in these ancient books were not complete. Some had a beginning but no end, some had a beginning but no end, and some only had the middle part without the beginning and the end. However, these ancient books obviously had a general pattern of inheritance, and it was obvious that they came from the same style of the sect. Then, these ancient books were obviously collected by Lao Tzu in an extremely chaotic place, which was why they appeared so messy and unsystematic. In fact, this situation made Lu Ping even more certain that Lao Tzu had been to the dojo of the Ying-Tian sect. This was because, according to what Lu Ping knew, when a sect was facing a crisis, they would often scatter the ancient books passed down by the sect and hide them everywhere. This was to prevent external enemies from invading and to find the complete inheritance of the sect in the process of looting. Once this happened, not only would the sect suffer great losses, but the external enemies could also rely on these looted complete inheritances to strengthen themselves. In the future, it would be too difficult for the sect to take revenge even if it wanted to. This was equivalent to aiding the enemy in disguise. After the ancient books were scattered, even if part of the inheritance was looted, the external enemies would not be able to figure out any complete inheritance from them. At most, they would only be able to use it as a reference, and the sect could use the disciples who cultivated these inheritances to perfect these lost ancient books in the future. Since Qingjin Laozu had found the dojo of the Ying-Tian sect, why couldn't he find all the ancient books passed down by the Ying-Tian sect? After all, Qingjin Laozu was a disciple of the Ying-Tian sect. To Lu Ping, this problem was easier to explain. First, the Songhai sect had been deceived by Qingjin Laozu. He was not a disciple of the Ying-Tian sect at all. He was just a lucky person who had found the dojo of the Ying-Tian sect and obtained part of the inheritance of the Ying-Tian sect. Secondly, even though the Ying-Tian sect was a large sect that was known for its defense, the various protective matrices and prohibitions within the dojo were not something that an early Dharma adept like Qingjin Laozu could completely break through. Qingjin Laozu had only broken through some of the prohibitions that he could break after entering the dojo and obtained some scattered ancient books. This was also the reason why the ancient books that Lu Ping had obtained in the cave were not systematic. After a night of enlightenment, Lu Ping had gained a lot. Even though he still could not see the essence of the 3 complete sets of inherited techniques, it was still useful for Lu Ping's training. Lu Ping sealed the 3 purple jade slips with a spirit sealing seal and put them away in his interspatial ring. Then, he took out a 3-legged cauldron that was half the height of a human and placed it on the ground. A top-grade alchemy cauldron, the Flying Rainbow Cauldron. Lu Ping had long suspected that since Qingjin Laozu was able to imitate the failing sect's spirit-forging pill, no matter how bad his alchemy skills were, he should at least be a master alchemist. Otherwise, how could he have created a spirit-forging pill of such high quality? However, Lu Ping did not obtain Qingjin Laozu's cauldron, spirit fire, and other items from the North Sea Qingjian cave. There were only a few elixir recipes and inherited techniques. Initially, Lu Ping thought that the other cultivators who had gone to explore the cave had obtained them. However, after that incident, Lu Ping had asked around and confirmed that the other cultivators did not obtain the cauldron, spirit fire, and other items. He did not expect that Qingjin Laozu's real alchemy place was in this secret cave. The quality of this Flying Rainbow Cauldron was not inferior to the top-rank cauldron that Lu Ping had once controlled. If he handed it over to the sect, Fornax Laozu would certainly be happy from ear to ear. However, if he wanted to obtain this Flying Rainbow Cauldron, Lu Ping would definitely have to extort a lot of good things from Fornax Laozu. However, for now, it was still better to refine it as his own spare cauldron. When Lu Ping was an alchemy master, he originally controlled a top-rank cauldron. At that time, Lu Ping replaced the Nanchuan cauldron with the Linchuan cauldron, and that top-rank cauldron just happened to be a spare cauldron. However, Jinling had a shortage of cauldrons, and Lu Ping usually did not have any use for that top-rank cauldron. Thus, at the request of Fornax Laozu, he returned the top-rank cauldron back to the Pill Pavilion. Currently, Lu Ping had a magic treasure-level cauldron, the Nanchuan cauldron, but a magic treasure-level cauldron was after all too eye-catching. However, Lu Ping just happened to lack a cauldron that could be used to deceive people. The appearance of this Flying Rainbow Cauldron was just right. After refining the Flying Rainbow Cauldron, Lu Ping flipped his hand and another orange flame appeared. Looking at this flame, Lu Ping shook his head in pity. After all, thousands of years had passed, and the little orange flame, which was originally a heaven-level lower-grade spirit fire, had become a third-grade spirit material due to the gradual loss of spirituality. Although it could still be used to refine pills, the effect would probably not be as good as the blue spirit fire in Lu Ping's hands. There were still some spirit herbs and spirit pills hidden in the pill room of the cave dwelling. However, most of these spirit pills and spirit herbs were not properly stored, so most of them had lost their effectiveness. There were only a few bottles of late core Forging Realm and Manifestation Realm spirit pills left. Perhaps it was because they were too valuable that he used a top-grade Jade Essence bottle and cast a spirit sealing restriction, which was why they did not lose their effectiveness. Just as Lu Ping was preparing to take stock of his other gains and the spoils of war from killing a few cultivators on Frost Island, Debeo excitedly ran into Lu Ping's stone room. The moment he entered the secret room, he shouted, "Boss, boss, there's some progress. We might be able to find the Tao field of Yingtian sect." Although the 6 spirit pets were forced by Lu Ping to read the records of Yingtian sect, these records were scattered and vast, so the 6 of them could only pick the ones that interested them. Samling and Lu Qiner were only interested in the growth of their own strength, so they mostly browsed through the jade scrolls that recorded the arts and techniques. Lu Dague, on the other hand, knew that his talent was not high. If he wanted to achieve something in the future, he would have to spend a lot of effort to stabilize his cultivation foundation. Therefore, he mostly studied the records of cultivation methods. Debeo, on the other hand, was different. He had once told Lu Ping that he wanted to appraise all the treasures in the world. Therefore, what he was interested in were all kinds of miscellaneous books in the cultivation world, his travels, and the catalogs of spirit herbs and spirit materials. It was precisely because he had read the most extensive records that he found some clues about Yingtian sect's Tao field from a record that recorded the history of Yingtian sect. Chapter 623. The boat transformed into the size of a small boat and traveled against the flow of the river outside the cave. Lu Ping stood at the bow of the boat, and beside him was a plump young man who looked to be about 17 or 18 years old. However, this young man's plump body was holding onto a small head. His pair of small eyes shone brightly as he scanned his surroundings. His too thin yet long mustache stretched outwards, causing him to look very comical. "Boss, do you think that this river is the Ying River?" The young man with the mustache stood behind Lu Ping and asked with a smile. "It's possible. I believe that there will be villages along the river. When the time comes, we can just ask them." The Yingtian sect was very famous in the past. The Ying River goes around the heavenly mountain, so it is called the Yingtian sect. I believe that it should be quite famous. Just as Lu Ping finished speaking, the sound of a fisherman's song could be heard from upstream. The fisherman's song was loud and clear, but it could be heard that the person singing was a young man. Lu Ping and Debeo looked towards the source of the sound. After a while, they saw a young man who looked to be about 14 or 15 years old holding a long pole and pushing a small boat down slowly from upstream. The fisherman's song was sung by this young man. When the young man saw that the boat under Lu Ping and Debeo's feet was able to drift upstream without anyone paddling, he did not show any surprise. Instead, he asked in a loud voice, "Are the 2 of you immortals who have come to admire the ruins of the Yingtian sect? Why don't you take my small boat? I'm familiar with the way, but the boat is moving slowly so that the 2 immortals can enjoy the scenery on both sides of the river." Lu Ping felt that this young man was quite bold. An ordinary mortal young man did not show the slightest bit of fear when he saw a cultivator. Instead, he dared to open his mouth and invite him to board the boat. However, when he heard this young man say that they were looking for the Sky Overflow ruins, and it seemed like this young man was very familiar with the location of the Sky Overflow ruins, his heart skipped a beat. He smiled and asked, "You're quite funny, young man. The speed of the boat under my feet is up to me. Why can't I see the scenery on both sides of the river? Why do I need to steer your slow boat?" When the young man came near, he raised his pole and stopped the boat. Seeing that it was Lu Ping who asked the question, he knew that Lu Ping was the one who made the decision, So he cupped his hands in greeting and said, even immortals have their own feelings. The scenery on both sides of the Ing River is beautiful. If you take this junior's boat, immortals will feel less impatient and more leisurely. Moreover, I know this surplus river like the back of my hand, and I'm also very familiar with the surplus sky ruins. It can be said that I'm very familiar with this place. When Lu Ping looked over, he saw that although the young man spoke calmly, there was a look of anticipation in his eyes. Lu Ping smiled and said, all right, we're also going to the surplus sky ruins to take a look. Since you know the way, let's take this young man's boat. When DeBeo heard this, he came forward worriedly and said, Boss, today is already the 8th day. I believe that the Laozu from the various sects in the North Sea should have already reached the Middle Earth. Time is of the essence, so why do we need to take this young man's boat? If this young man really knows where the surplus sky ruins is, he can just fly there with him. Moreover, this young man's gaze is not pure. I'm afraid he has other intentions. Lu Ping smiled without saying a word. DeBeo knew that Lu Ping already had an idea, so he retreated behind him and did not say anything else. When the young man heard that Lu Ping had agreed, his face instantly became excited. He hurriedly moved the boat over. Lu Ping and DeBeo directly walked onto the boat, but the boat did not move at all. Immortals, please sit tight. This young man is starting the boat. The young man deftly turned the boat around in the water. He pushed the pole downwards, and the boat immediately moved forward. DeBeo looked at the young man in surprise and said, How old are you this year, kid? You're so strong. The young man seemed to be used to being asked this way by ordinary people. He smiled and said, This young man is already 12 this year. It's just that I've been strong since I was young, and I'm tall. So most people think that I'm only 14 or 15 years old. Born with great strength? DeBeo smiled and asked again, You just said that this river is the surplus river, and you immediately guessed that we're going to see the surplus sky ruins. Could it be that this surplus sky ruins is very easy to find, and many immortals come here to admire it? The young man was indeed very strong. He slowly pushed the boat against the current and answered unhurriedly, The surplus river surrounds the sky mountain, which is why the surplus sky sect was formed. The surplus sky sect is located on the sky mountain, but it's already in ruins now. I've heard many immortals say that the surplus sky sect is a great sect in the world. Every year and every month, there will be immortals coming here to admire the ruins. Sometimes, this young man is lucky enough to ferry 1 or 2 immortals to the sky mountain. DeBeo snorted and said, What do you mean by admiring the ruins? I'm afraid you're here to search for treasures. However, when he remembered that they were also here for the surplus sky sect's dojo that was hidden in the void, he could not help but blush. However, DeBeo was thick-skinned, so the blush only lasted for a moment. He continued to ask, Have you seen the surplus sky ruins before? The young man pursed his lips and said, How can I not have seen it before? However, this young man is just an ordinary person. What I saw was just a pile of broken bricks and tiles. I also find it strange that when immortals come here to admire the ruins, they always look around and even rummage through it, which makes the ruins even more dilapidated. It's as if they're looking for something. You didn't go in and rummage through it? No, the ruins on the Sky Mountain are occupied by the immortals of the Surplus River sect, Enchantment sect, and Tao Universe sect. The immortals of the 3 sects guard it together. If you want to enter the Sky Mountain, you have to get their permission and hand over some spirit stones. Surplus River sect? Enchantment sect? Tao Universe sect? What sect is that? Is it very powerful? How many Dharma adepts does the sect have, Laozu? When DeBeo heard this, he was a little surprised and asked a series of questions. However, he saw that the young man had a blank look on his face. He clearly did not know what DeBeo was asking about, but he still answered anyway. Lu Ping, who was standing at the side, asked, Did all the cultivators who were sent here hand over spirit stones to go up the mountain? The young man shook his head and said, Not really. This young man does not know how they disappeared. They must have used immortal techniques to hide themselves from the immortals guarding the Sky Mountain. Boss, it looks like the cultivators from the 3 sects who guard the surplus sky ruins aren't people with high cultivation. I'm afraid that the ruins weren't forcefully occupied by the three sects with formations, Debeo said after some thought. Lu Ping nodded and said, that's normal. Let's not talk about the strength of the three sections. If they really surrounded the ruins of the surplus sky sect with a formation and didn't allow anyone to enter or leave as they pleased, they would definitely incur the wrath of the public. Therefore, the cultivators sent by the three sects are definitely not people with high cultivation. If they encounter cultivators with low cultivation, they will collect some spirit stones, but cultivators with high cultivation won't care about the spirit stones. Even if there are some who are unwilling to pay, they can just sneak in. I believe the cultivators from the three sects will just turn a blind eye to it. At this moment, the voice of the young man on the boat rang out. With a hint of embarrassment, he said, Immortals, this young man has sent the two of you over. I wonder if the two of you can give this young man 1 or 2 spirit stones as a reward. Debeo said with some displeasure, you're just a mortal boy. What use do you have for spirit stones? You're just attracting the greed of others. If you run into a cultivator with bad intentions, they'll steal your spirit stones and then casually kill you. Do you think someone will help you? I have a piece of gold here. I'll give it to you when we reach the Sky Mountain. It'll be enough for you to live comfortably for a year, without having to walk on the surplus river. When the young man heard what Debeo said, he quickly waved his hand and said, Immortals, please don't be angry. This young man is not greedy. It's just that my mother is bedridden. All the doctors in the surrounding villages have not been able to cure her. The doctors said that perhaps only the Immortals of the Surplus River sect can cure her. If we want to ask the Immortals of the Surplus River sect to cure my mother, we'll need spirit stones. Debeo glanced at Lu Ping. Seeing that he was not concerned about these things, he waved his hand impatiently and said, all right, you're lucky today. 1 or 2 spirit stones are not enough for us. Just row your boat. When we reach the destination, I'll give you 2 spirit stones. The young man was overjoyed and thanked Lu Ping profusely. He used more strength to push the pole in his hand. Even though the boat was going against the current, its speed was not slow. 2 hours later, the young man still had not used up all his strength. His face was slightly red, and his breathing was a little faster. Even though the surplus river flowed through the mountain range, the river's flow was not rapid. Both sides of the river seemed to enter a basin. However, even Lu Ping found it unbelievable that a 12-year-old young man was able to row a 3-person boat against the current for such a long time. With Debao and Lu Ping's foresight, they could tell at a glance that the young man hadn't awakened his bloodline, and there wasn't even a trace of spiritual energy in his body. The fact that he was able to sail against the current for so long was all due to his strong physique and astounding strength. Debeo saw the curiosity on Lu Ping's face, so he asked, Young man, where's your family from? What's your name? Who else is there in your family? The young man wiped his sweat and took a deep breath. Immortal, my surname is Du. My family is the Du family village by the surplus river. My mother is the only one in my family. My father gave me a nickname, Rengue. Later, the teacher in the village gave me a full name, Jialua. My name is Du Jialua. Debeo stroked his long beard. This action looked very funny to Du Jialua. He could not help but smile at Debeo. Debeo did not mind. Instead, he asked, Little brother Du, you said that your mother's illness could only be treated by the cultivators of the Surplus River sect. I believe that your village is under the jurisdiction of the Surplus River sect. Then, didn't the cultivators of the Surplus River sect come to your village to activate your bloodline? When he heard Debeo's question, Du Jialua, who had been smiling all this while, became much quieter. He said, Why not? Unfortunately, I did not succeed. Chapter 624. Debeo glanced at Lu Ping, then turned to Du Jialua and asked, Brat, did you accidentally eat some kind of treasure when you were young? Du Jialua revealed a surprised expression and said, Immortal, you must be joking. How could I have such fortune? Otherwise, I would probably have become an immortal by now. Why would I still need to fish on this river? Lu Ping, who was listening to the conversation, saw a trace of vigilance in Du Jialua's eyes when he saw the surprise on Du Jialua's face. Lu Ping smiled silently. The small boat followed the flow of the river, and after another hour, a towering lone peak appeared in the distance. Du Jialua used all his strength to push the long pole, and the small boat slid forward for nearly 10 feet. When he took the opportunity to retract the pole, he said with a smile, "Immortals, please take a look. We're almost at the lone peak of the heavenly mountain where the remnants of Ingtian are located." Lu Ping looked at the lone peak that stood like a sharp sword from afar. He couldn't help but say curiously, "Eh? The lone peak of Sky Mountain is quite special. It actually divides the Ing River into two rivers. The Ing River just happens to circle the lone peak of Sky Mountain in the middle." Du Jialua revealed a look of astonishment and said, "This immortal indeed has good eyesight. This celestial mountain's lone peak is at least 10 miles away from us, yet an immortal can see it so clearly from such a distance. The Surplus River flows around Celestial Mountain's lone peak, which is how the Surplus Heavens sect got its name." When they reached the foot of the lone peak of Sky Mountain, Du Jialua steered the boat towards the shore. From afar, he could see a few rays of light rising from the mountainside and landing in the direction of Lu Ping and the others. "Hee, so it's the kid from the Du family. You're quite lucky today. You actually brought 2 cultivators here at once." When the light dissipated, 3 mid-blood condensation cultivators appeared. The 3 cultivators were wearing different robes. Clearly, they belonged to different sections. The one in the lead seemed to be familiar with Du Jialua as he started talking to him from afar. On the small boat, Du Jialua hurriedly bowed to the 3 of them and said, "Greetings, immortals. This time, I was just lucky. These 2 immortals took pity on me, which was why I was able to board this junior's boat. Otherwise, with the abilities of the immortals, how could I have wasted so much time to get here?" The cultivator in front looked at Lu Ping and Debao, and his heart sank. He hurriedly bowed and said, "Ing He sect disciple Kai Yun greets the 2 seniors." After he finished speaking, he pointed at the 2 cultivators behind him and said, "These 2 are senior brothers from Ing Shan sect and Dao Universe sect." The 2 cultivators who had come with Kai Yun had also discovered that Lu Ping and Debao were exuding an unfathomable aura, and they hurriedly stepped forward to pay their respects. Debao casually waved his hand and said, "The 3 of you don't have to do this. We are only here to see the ruins of Ingtian and pay our respects to the number 1 sect in the North Ice Plains in the past. I wonder what's left of the ruins on the peak of Tian Shan?" Kai Yun revealed a troubled expression. The cultivation of the 2 cultivators in front of him was clearly unfathomable. In the past, when cultivators like Lu Ping arrived, they would directly enter the peak of Tian Shan. Why would they care about the disciples guarding the mountain? The cultivators from the 3 sects were also happy not to offend them. They would only stop cultivators below the core forging realm from entering the mountain and collect some fees from them. However, not only did these 2 not enter the peak of Tian Shan, but they even asked them about the ruins in a friendly manner. This caused Kai Yun and the others to be at a loss. Seeing that Kai Yun was momentarily stunned, Debao said with some displeasure, "I heard that you guys have to pay spirit stones to enter the Ingtian ruins. Don't tell me that you won't even answer our questions if we don't pay? How stingy. How many spirit stones do we have to pay for a single trip up the mountain? Just name a number. As long as it's not too ridiculous, we won't care about such a small amount of money. However, please explain the situation of the Ingtian ruins to us clearly." Kai Yun and the others didn't expect these 2 to be so easy to talk to. They automatically skipped over the part that Debao called them stingy, leaving only the second half of the sentence. Instantly, their faces lit up with ecstasy. The small amount of money in the eyes of these core forging enlightened masters was a huge fortune to these blood condensation realm cultivators. Hence, Kai Yun took the lead and said, "The ruins of the Ingtian ruins have been in ruins for thousands of years. However, the Ingtian sect was famous in the northern ice plains in the past. The sect's ancient books are as vast as the ocean. The 2 of you might be able to find some opportunities that others can't." Lu Ping looked in the direction that the 3 of them had come from. His divine sense instantly captured the traces of 3 core forging realm cultivators. They were obviously the strongest cultivators of the 3 sects stationed here. Furthermore, these 3 cultivators were also paying attention to Lu Ping and the others. After giving Debao a look, Debeo took out 2 low-grade spirit stones. He threw one of them to Du Jialua, who was staring at Lu Ping and Kai Yun, but didn't dare to interrupt. He weighed the other spirit stone in his hand and said, "Kid, if you have nothing to do, wait for us here. When we come down, we'll take your boat back. At that time, we'll give you this spirit stone as well. How about it?" Du Jialua seemed to be struggling, but in the end, he couldn't resist the temptation of the spirit stone. He nodded and said, "I'll wait here for the 2 immortals to return." Debeo turned to Kai Yun and asked, "How much do you need to pay for the passage?" Kai Yun smiled awkwardly and hesitated for a moment. Finally, he seemed to have made up his mind. However, there was still a hint of hesitation in his tone. He said, "Senior must be joking. Our 3 sects are here to preserve the ruins of the Ying Tian sect as much as possible. If the 2 of you go together, how about 20 mid-grade spirit stones?" Debeo looked at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. He seemed to have seen through Kai Yun's intentions. Just when Kai Yun was about to give in under Debeo's stare, Debeo casually threw 20 mid-grade spirit stones to him and said, "Your business is not bad. I'll have to give it a try next time." Kai Yun didn't understand what Debeo meant. He quickly focused his attention on the 20 mid-grade spirit stones in his hand. For a mid-blood condensation cultivator, 20 mid-grade spirit stones could be considered a windfall. However, he didn't know how many of them would end up in the hands of the 3 of them. On top of the lone peak of the heavenly mountain, Debeo couldn't help but open his mouth to speak. However, he saw Lu Ping make a shushing gesture. Debeo was a smart person. When he saw Lu Ping's gesture, he knew that someone was secretly monitoring them. He followed Lu Ping and walked around the overgrown ruins. After a while, the 2 of them entered a colorful cloud. "Boss, this is simply a pile of broken bricks and broken tiles. Along the way, I didn't even find a single spiritual energy gathering area. For the past several thousand years, the cultivators who entered and exited this heavenly mountain lone peak were actually able to search this ruin so thoroughly that even a dignified core forging stage treasure-seeking mouse like me couldn't find a single trace of it. This can be considered a miracle. I wonder if you've discovered anything, boss?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "What can I find? The Ying Tian dojo has been missing for thousands of years. Countless cultivators have entered and exited this place, but none of them found anything. You're just a spirit-seeking mouse, so what can you do?" Debeo was quite dissatisfied and corrected him, "Boss, I'm a treasure-seeking mouse, not a spirit-seeking mouse." However, those people from the Ying He sect, Ying Shan sect, and Tao Universe sect actually claimed this place as their own. They even thought of using this place to make a fortune. This is quite rare. 5 colored clouds surrounded the 2 of them as they floated all over the lone peak of the heavenly mountain. However, other than the broken rocks and tiles that were hidden in the green, there was not even a single carving that could prove that this was the remains of the Ying Tian faction. Under the cover of the colorful cloud, Debeo and Lu Ping casually wandered around the lone peak of the heavenly mountain. They reminisced about this large sect that had shaken the northern ice fields thousands of years ago. Even though the Ying Tian sect had been destroyed for thousands of years, the layout of the Ying Tian sect's buildings could still be seen from the broken walls on the lone peak of the heavenly mountain. Lu Ping wasn't proficient in the layout of formations. Otherwise, if Hu Lily was here, she would definitely be able to deduce and use the layout of the Ying Tian sect's great sect-protecting formation from the positions of these buildings. However, Lu Ping was quite knowledgeable when it came to deciphering the individual restrictions that made up a formation. It was a pity that the restrictions rarely used the location of the terrain. Debeo accompanied Lu Ping as they looked at the ruins of the Ying Tian sect for a long time. Finally, he couldn't help but ask, "Boss, what's so interesting about these ruins?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "It doesn't matter if I don't understand them. I can only see some clues from the buildings of the Ying Tian sect. However, I can record the layout of these buildings and their positions. In the future, when the Jinling sect becomes a large sect, the various buildings on Heaven Spirit Mountain will definitely need to be renovated and expanded. When that time comes, the layout of the Ying Tian sect will be very useful for our sect. Even though the Ying Tian sect was destroyed, the ruins are still in good condition. I'm afraid it won't be easy to find such well-preserved ruins in the world of cultivation. Debeo nodded his head as if he understood. After a while, he couldn't help but ask, "Boss, did you notice anything wrong with that little fellow called Du Jialua?" Lu Ping smiled and said, "He's just a lucky little fellow. It's rare for him to have some petty tricks up his sleeves." However, he didn't know that his little tricks might bring him a great calamity. Lu Ping looked at Debeo and couldn't help but ask curiously, "Did you discover something else?" Seeing that he actually knew something that even his boss didn't know, Debeo couldn't help but ask excitedly, "Boss, did you really not discover anything else?" Seeing that Lu Ping was amused and nodded his head, Debeo's expression became even more excited. His mustache trembled as he chuckled softly and said, "Boss, there's a demonic aura on this kid's body." Demonic aura? Lu Ping was stunned for a moment. He really hadn't discovered this. Chapter 625. Demonic aura. Lu Ping asked in surprise. Clearly, he did not sense any demonic aura from Du Jialua's body. "It's demonic aura." Debeo pointed at his own nose proudly and said, "Even though the demonic aura is very faint and other demonic cultivators might not be able to sense it, he can't hide it from me." Lu Ping finally looked interested and asked, "Can you tell what kind of demonic cultivator he is?" Debeo's face fell, and he said, "Boss, it's already very good that I can sense the demonic aura from that kid. How can I tell what kind of demonic cultivator he is? But this kid is a real human and not a demon. Of course. Otherwise, even if he could hide it from me, how could he hide it from the He sect's cultivator who performed a blood test on him and performed a spell on him after he was awakened by the bloodline of the He sect cultivator?" Lu Ping glanced at Debeo and said, "You're saying that he has a demonic cultivator by his side?" "That's right." Debeo's expression became more and more excited, and he even looked a little impatient. "So what?" Debeo's enthusiasm was doused by Lu Ping's disregard. "Boss, my good boss." Debeo was so anxious that he ran around in circles in the cloud formed by the multicolored cloud-light robe. "That kid is obviously lying. In the cultivation world, it's only because the bloodline is thin that the bloodline cannot be awakened. I've never heard of anyone being born with divine strength that can restrict their bloodline from refining spirit chi. That kid has obviously consumed a heavenly treasure that can strengthen his body. That's why his body is so much stronger than others, and he can't awaken his bloodline." Seeing that Lu Ping was still indifferent, Debeo finally couldn't take it anymore. He jumped in front of Lu Ping and said, "It's a heavenly treasure that can increase the strength of the body. Boss, look at that kid. He's just a mortal, without any spiritual power to purify his body, but he can actually increase the strength of his body to the level of a low-grade magic tool. Aren't you tempted? What heavenly treasure did he eat? That treasure is probably comparable to the azure wood pure jade fruit you obtained in the fallen ruins, right?" Lu Ping calmly said, "This kind of treasure can only be produced once in thousands of years, and it will usually wither after it matures. Since he has already eaten it, then even if I find the place where the treasure grew from through him, I'm afraid I won't be able to find anything. Sigh, since that's the case, I'll send that brat away after we descend the mountain. Originally, I thought that I would be able to obtain a treasure from that brat, but it looks like that won't be possible now." "That's not necessary." Debeo was a little confused by Lu Ping's words. He asked in confusion, "Boss, then what do you mean? Do you know that if a mortal doesn't have spiritual power to purify his body, even if he uses a treasure that strengthens his body, it's still impossible for the treasure's effect to be completely applied to his body? Then where will the effect be?" Debeo asked in confusion. "Will it be wasted? A large part of the treasure's effect will be hidden in the mortal's bloodline. This is the main reason why Du Jialua can't awaken his bloodline." Debeo was now completely confused. He didn't know what Lu Ping was planning to do, so he could only flatter him. This kind of situation, I'm afraid only an alchemy grandmaster like Boss would be able to see through it. The cultivator from the Tian faction responsible for awakening the young man's bloodline probably doesn't even know what's going on. No, he knows what's going on. Lu Ping's gaze suddenly became cold, and Debeo suddenly felt a bone-piercing chill. However, he heard Lu Ping continue, to be able to activate the young man's bloodline awakening ceremony, the cultivator must at least be at the core forging stage. As an alchemy grandmaster, how could he not know the effect of a treasure that strengthens the body on a mortal? Lu Ping glanced at Debeo, and his cold gaze caused Debeo to shiver. Then, he heard Lu Ping continue, Debeo, all these years you've been browsing through the human race's ancient books, and your knowledge has increased a lot. However, you're still far from it. In the alchemy world, there's an extremely famous but rarely mentioned pill. I wonder if you've heard of it? Debeo could no longer keep up with Lu Ping's jumping thoughts, so he could only follow Lu Ping's words and ask, Boss, what pill is it? Mortal pill. Debeo instantly felt a wave of cold air penetrate from his spine straight into his head, and it immediately exploded. His brain was filled with ice shards. Boss, you're talking about that kid? Lu Ping nodded his head and said, It's just a mortal spell. It seems like Tian faction has Dharma Laozu in charge, and that kid surnamed Du's bloodline that strengthens the body was discovered by the alchemy grandmasters of Tian faction during the bloodline awakening ceremony. However, they lied to him, saying that it was because of this kid's innate divine strength that caused his bloodline to be unable to communicate with the spirit. I'm afraid that this kid will be refined into a mortal pill by the alchemy grandmasters of Tian faction, and then fed to the sect's Dharma Laozu to strengthen his body and resist the Dharma tribulation. The multicolored robe transformed into a white cloud and slowly floated down from the peak of Heavenly Mountain. For once, Debeo was obedient and quiet. Lu Ping said faintly, What did you find about the Tian dojo in the records of the history of Tian faction? Debeo pondered for a moment, then answered, That was a conversation between a disciple of Tian faction and a Laozu. The disciple asked, If the sect is in disarray, where can we find the dojo? That Laozu replied, The water of the Ying River comes from the heavens. Then, the disciple said, Good. Lu Ping nodded his head and said, Originally, we were thinking of this Heaven Mountain. This is where the Tian faction used to be, so it is naturally the most likely place to hide the Tian dojo. However, for thousands of years, countless cultivators have used countless methods to search this place, but they have still come up empty-handed. It is obvious that there is no way that the Tian dojo can hide on this Heaven Mountain. Of course, even if it really exists, it is not something we can find. However, I believe that the Tian dojo is not on this Heaven Mountain. This time, Debeo finally caught up with Lu Ping's train of thought. He nodded his head and said, Boss is right. Then, in the mountain range where the Tian faction used to dominate half of the northern plains, there should be another mountain called Heaven Mountain, or something related to Heaven Mountain standing beside the Ying River? Lu Ping put away the multicolored cloud-light robe. Lu Ping and Debeo suddenly appeared at the foot of Heaven Mountain's lone peak, under the dumbfounded gazes of the cultivators from the three sections. Debeo stretched out his hand and threw another low-grade spirit stone into Du Jalua's hand. He said, Hey, kid with the surname Du, have you rested well? If you have, then quickly set sail over there. Let's first circle around this Heaven Mountain. After Lu Ping and Du Jalua left on the small boat, 3 streaks of light descended from the mountainside. The streaks of light faded away, revealing the figures of 3 core forging cultivators. The person in the lead looked at the small boat that was disappearing into the distance. No one knew what he was thinking. Behind him, a cultivator wearing a short-sleeved tight robe asked, Brother Kai, did you notice anything wrong with those 2? The cultivator in the lead shook his head and said, Brother Huang, you must be joking. I'm very ashamed. Those 2's strength is far above mine. They easily escaped from my surveillance. Brother Huang smiled and said, Brother Kai, don't worry about it. There are many high-level cultivators who have infiltrated the Sky Mountain ruins. We don't even know many of them have entered. At this time, another cultivator also said, Brother Kai, do you think those 2 found something on Heaven Mountain's lone peak? Brother Kai shook his head and said, Brother Zhangyu, that's impossible. If they really found something, they wouldn't have left so easily. The 3 of them talked for a while, more before Brother Huang and Brother Zhangyu returned to the mountainside. Brother Kai waved his hand and called Kai Yun over. He asked, That kid hasn't shown any unusual behavior recently, right? Kaiyun smiled and said, "Third uncle, he's just a lucky mortal. What can he find? He's still doing normal ferrying and fishing. Also, his old mother seems to have fallen ill recently. Many doctors have failed to cure her. The kid is currently earning spirit stones, and it seems he wants to ask our sect's disciples for help." Brother Kai waved his hand and said, "Just in case, no matter who he asks for help from, go to his house and cure his old mother. Give her some pills to strengthen her body. In the future, when the kid goes missing, go to his house and leave some money for his widowed mother. It can be considered a good reputation for our sect." Kaiyun nodded and said, "Don't worry, third uncle. Nephew will definitely take care of this matter." Kaiyun hesitated for a moment before asking again, "Third uncle, what happened to that kid? Is he worth your personal attention?" Brother Kai's expression turned serious, and he said in a low voice, "There are some things that you shouldn't know. You only need to know that our sect's Laozu has personally taken care of this matter." Kaiyun was startled, and he lowered his head, not daring to ask any more questions. Above the Ying River, Lu Ping was resting with his eyes closed. Debeo couldn't stay still, so he began to chat with Du Jelua. "Oh, you're saying that the cultivator with the surname Kai was one of the cultivators who presided over the bloodline awakening ceremony for the children in your village?" Du Jialua nodded and said, "That's right. That immortal Kai came with his third uncle. At that time, all the cultivators listened to his third uncle. I, immortal Kai, am the best. He used immortal techniques to help the village do a lot of things. Everyone still remembers his kindness." Debeo looked in Lu Ping's direction and saw Lu Ping opening his eyes thoughtfully. He murmured, "Strange, strange. From what I can see, this Celestial Mountains peak is already the highest peak in the Yingtian mountain range. Could it be that there is a special peak in the Ying River?" Du Jialua blinked and said, "Immortal, there is something you don't know. Although this Celestial Mountains peak is tall, it is not the highest peak in the Yingtian mountain range." "Oh." There was a flash of light in Lu Ping's eyes. He smiled gently and said, "Celestial Mountains peak is so tall that it pierces the clouds. With my eyesight, I can see hundreds of miles away. However, I haven't seen a peak taller than Celestial Mountains peak." As long as that kid isn't too stupid and can tear the charm in time, the true essence in the storage charm will naturally activate the true essence one chi sword treasure. Hiss. Debeo sucked in a mouthful of cold air and said, "How did you fuse two talismans? You should know that the power of a talisman varies from person to person. The power of a talisman can never be compared to the power of the talisman maker's own true essence. But your talisman, no matter who uses it, can maintain the power of the talisman. If Martial Uncle Xianju knew about this, I'm afraid he would be as crazy as Laozu when he saw the Nachuan cauldron, right?" On the summit of the wordless peak, the biting cold wind was not only cold but also fierce. The cold wind was like a small knife constantly cutting people's skin. Fortunately, Lu Ping and Debeo were core forging stage cultivators, so they could naturally ignore the cold wind. The bare mountain top was left with only ice and snow, accompanied only by the howling cold wind. "Big brother, have you found any traces of a hidden space?" Lu Ping's eyes flickered with a green light. The power of the 3 pure true pupils that had fused with 5 kinds of water attribute treasures was even more powerful. However, Lu Ping circled around the wordless peak for a long time, but he still couldn't find any traces of a hidden space. Lu Ping pondered for a moment, then his eyes lit up and said, "Come, let's go to the source of the abundant river." The two descended the mountain and followed the main stream of the abundant river towards the wordless peak. Following the abundant river, the source was actually formed by many tributaries. Lu Ping and Debeo only followed the largest of the tributaries until they arrived at a slope covered by a vast layer of ice. Looking at the clear flowing water under the ice, Debeo touched his mustache and asked in confusion, "Big brother, what can we find here?" Not hearing Lu Ping's answer, Debeo couldn't help but raise his head to look at Lu Ping. He saw that Lu Ping was looking at the border of the ice field and the ground not far away. Debeo followed Lu Ping's gaze and saw a pile of rubble. Lu Ping strode towards it with DeBeo following closely behind without saying a word. When the two got closer, they saw a pile of rubble. It looked like a collapsed temple, but also like an abandoned altar. Lu Ping pointed at the source of the abundant river under the ice. A column of water rose from the ice and fell directly on the pile of rubble. It washed away the rubble and even pushed away the soil by more than a foot. When the column of water disappeared, only a 3-foot-tall stone platform was left on the ground. There might have been some kind of inscription on the stone platform, but it had long since disappeared. However, the stone platform that had just been washed by the abundant river didn't have a single drop of water on it. As expected, there was something fishy. Lu Ping carefully looked at the stone platform and suddenly heard DeBeo shout from the other side of the stone platform, "Big brother, look over here." When Lu Ping rushed over, he saw a rough groove carved on a section of the stone platform. Lu Ping didn't know why, but he felt that the groove, which looked like a mold, was unusually familiar. He must have seen it somewhere before. Lu Ping was excited. His intuition couldn't be wrong. He must have an item on him that was about the same size as this groove. It was something that Lao Tzu left behind in the past. Perhaps it was the key to opening the Yingtian dojo. However, this item was obviously not very eye-catching, so Lu Ping didn't have a deep impression of it. However, after Lu Ping rummaged through the items he found in the cave and cave-dwelling in the interspatial ring, he still couldn't find anything. This result made Lu Ping a little discouraged. At this time, DeBeo seemed to have thought of something and whispered, "Big brother, in the underwater cave, I once found a clay pot that Lao Tzu used to store top-grade spiritual tea." Lu Ping slapped his forehead and suddenly realized something. He took out a gray clay pot from his storage ring. This clay pot was a psychic magic weapon. However, to Lu Ping's amusement, this magic weapon didn't have any attack or defense functions. It didn't even have any other auxiliary functions such as storage, and spirit gathering. The only function it had was preservation. That's right, preservation. When Lu Ping got this clay pot, he secretly sighed at Lao Tzu's extravagance. In the North Sea, no Lao Tzu would spend time and energy to create such a boring psychic magic weapon, let alone spend precious spiritual materials to refine such a kind of psychic magic weapon. In this situation, perhaps only a cultivator born in a big sect in the central region would have the leisure to make such a magic weapon when he was bored. However, after Lu Ping got this clay pot, he often put spiritual tea, spiritual herb seeds, and other items into this magic weapon. At least, when Luan Yu collected a large number of spiritual herb seeds that were extinct or about to be extinct in the cultivation world from the Sea of Flowers in the secret land of the Fallen Mountain, she stored all kinds of spiritual herb seeds in this clay pot, and then planted them in the spiritual herb garden in the House of Gold. Lu Ping put the clay pot into the groove. The result of the perfect fit made Lu Ping and DeBeo's eyes light up. The 3-foot-high stone platform suddenly shook, and a large number of dense lines suddenly appeared on the cross-section of the stone platform. Starting from the mouth of the clay pot, they instantly covered the whole stone platform. Just when the two were waiting for a miracle to happen, the stone platform suddenly stopped shaking, and the lines on the surface of the stone platform gradually disappeared. Lu Ping and DeBeo looked at each other. The clay pot was still placed in the hidden groove, intact. Lu Ping looked at the gradually disappearing lines, and finally, his eyes fixed on the hidden groove where the lines were the most concentrated. DeBeo was at a loss as he watched Lu Ping take the clay pot out of the hidden groove, and then put the clay pot into the water that had melted under the ice to fill it up. Then, he put the clay pot back into the hidden groove. Rumble. Amidst the violent shaking, the lines on the surface of the stone platform appeared again. The water from the clay pot flowed along the mouth of the clay pot, and the fine lines engraved on the stone platform overflowed. Then, it continued to extend along these lines. The stone platform, which was originally unstained by the water from the clay pot, was soon soaked by the water from the clay pot. The stone platform shook more and more violently, and the clay pot placed in the groove suddenly began to rotate. The space at the mouth of the clay pot suddenly began to distort, and DeBeo, who was looking down carefully, jumped back in fright. The range of the spatial distortion gradually expanded, and gradually, it formed a spatial door big enough for a person to enter and exit. Then, the door seemed to have reached its limit and began to shrink again. Lu Ping patted Debao's shoulder and said, "Hurry up." After speaking, he was the first to jump into the spatial door. Debao's expression was absent-minded for a moment. When he saw that the door was about to shrink to the point where he could no longer enter, he let out a strange cry, closed his eyes, and jumped in. The spatial door continued to shrink until it became a distorted space again, and then gradually calmed down. However, at this time, there was no longer a gray clay pot on the stone platform, only a bare stone platform that seemed to be wet with dew. From a distance, it looked somewhat strange. In an unknown space, Debao, who had fallen on his butt, got up from the ground and rubbed his fat butt. He asked Lu Ping, who was standing in front of him, "Boss, is this the Ingtian dojo?" Amidst the colorful flowing lights, Lu Ping sighed and said, "Debao, I'm afraid we won't have much to gain this time." Chapter 627. Debao was still captivated by the colorful scene in front of him. When he heard Lu Ping's words, he asked in confusion, "Boss, why is that?" Lu Ping pointed at the colorful scene and said, "These are the prohibitions of the Ingtian dojo." After the Ingtian sect activated the sect-protecting formation and hid the true legacy dojo in the void, every link of the formation in the dojo was covered by prohibitions. That's why the scene in front of us is like this. If we want to gain something from this dojo, we have to break the prohibitions covering it one by one. Debao scratched his head and said, "Boss, although these prohibitions were formed after the sect-protecting formation of the Ingtian sect was activated, and the difficulty of breaking them is extremely high, there are still relatively easy prohibitions that can be broken. Furthermore, you have quite a bit of experience in breaking prohibitions. No matter what, you can't return empty-handed, right?" Lu Ping said impatiently, "Don't forget about Qingjian Laozu. He is Laozu at the early Dharma stage. No matter how good I am at breaking prohibitions, I am only a late core forging adept. Some of the prohibitions that I can break can be destroyed by Dharma Laozu with brute force. Since Qingjian Laozu is the successor of the Ingtian sect, he must have entered the Ingtian dojo many times. He must have broken all the prohibitions that can be broken and obtained everything that can be obtained. As for the prohibitions that he can't break, I'm afraid we won't be able to break them either." When Debao heard Lu Ping say this, he looked a little dejected. However, he quickly recovered and said, "The inheritances of the Ingtian sect that we found in the cave must have been obtained by Qingjian Laozu from the Ingtian dojo. No matter what, they are still in our hands. Boss, just the 3 complete sets of inherited techniques in your hands is enough to make this trip worthwhile. No matter what, we still have to come and take a look. At least the spirit herbs in this dojo have been growing for 3,000 to 4,000 years. This space is full of spirit energy, so most of the spirit herbs must have matured. There should be some 3,000-year spirit herbs as well." Looking at the lush spirit herb garden on the ground, Lu Ping, Samling, Lu Qiner, and Lu Daguay were all focused on collecting spirit herbs. Only Debao looked miserably at the colorful prohibitions in the distance. At this moment, Debao had already sensed the aura of several treasures and pointed them out to Lu Ping one by one. But Lu Ping could only sigh helplessly as he looked at the buildings that were covered by the prohibitions. The treasures were right in front of him, but he could not obtain them. To Debao, this was undoubtedly a form of torture. The absent-minded Debao quickly tore off 4 to 5 stalks of 1,000-year spirit herbs. One of them was even a 3,000-year spirit herb that was often used to refine Dharma pills. Lu Ping was instantly enraged and scolded, "Debao, what are you doing?" Lu Qiner was also someone who could not sit still. Seeing that Lu Ping was angry at Debao, she immediately walked over to Debao with a smile and tried to pull his mustache. Debao was so frightened that he retreated a few steps and tried to use the earth escape technique to escape. This was originally Debao's usual trick, but he had forgotten that this Ingtian dojo was the final inheritance ground of the Ingtian faction. There were countless prohibitions intertwined, so how could he use the earth escape technique? Debao stood up from the ground, clutching his forehead. However, There was now a large bruise on his forehead. Lu Qin couldn't help but laugh at this sight. At this time, Debeo could not care less about the pain on his head. Instead, he excitedly said to Lu Ping, "Boss, I found something. The soil here is mixed with the growing soil." Lu Ping rolled his eyes at him and said, "You don't have to say that. Otherwise, how could the spirit herbs grow so luxuriantly here without any supervision? Even if the spirit qi in this dojo was abundant, such a situation would not occur." Debeo chuckled and suddenly condensed a ball of yellow true essence in his hands. Then, with a flip of his hands, the true essence scattered evenly like raindrops into an area with a radius of nearly 200 feet. Then, with a solemn expression, Debeo placed one of his palms on the ground, as if he was feeling something. Only Lu Ping's 3 pure eyes could see that there was a continuous flow of true essence in Debeo's palms that was scattering in all directions, resonating with the yellow true essence that had been scattered into the ground earlier. After about the time it took to drink half a cup of tea, Debeo suddenly let out a low shout and slowly lifted his palms from the ground. Looking at the strenuous expression on Debeo's face, it was as if this hand was lifting a huge rock. The yellow true essence in an area with a radius of nearly 200 feet constantly converged towards Debeo's raised palms. At the same time, along with the true essence, there were also wisps of smoke and dust. Only Lu Ping could vaguely see these tiny wisps of dust with the help of his 3 pure eyes. Hundreds of wisps of dust gradually converged under Debeo's palms. First, it was the size of a bean, then it gradually grew to the size of a finger, then it gradually grew to the size of an egg, and finally, it grew to the size of half a fist. At this time, Lu Ping could no longer see the wisps of dust carried by the returning true essence. The half-fist-sized wisps of dust gradually condensed and shrank back to the size of a finger. Impressively, it was a small piece of growing soil. Debeo proudly handed this small piece of growing soil to Lu Ping. Lu Ping held the growing soil and looked at it for a moment. He said, "It's very pure, and the quality is extremely high. I didn't think that after advancing to the core forging stage, Debeo would actually have such an ability." Debeo became more and more proud of himself. Lu Qin didn't miss this opportunity and said, "Debeo is awesome. Look at this spirit grass garden. It's only a few hundred feet in radius. Quickly condense a few more pieces of growing soil." When Debeo heard this, his complexion suddenly collapsed. Condensing the growing soil was an innate ability that he had obtained after advancing to the core forging stage. However, every time he used this innate ability, it would almost consume all of Debeo's true essence. How could he have any spare energy to use it a second time? Debeo looked at Lu Ping with a pleading gaze. He saw that Lu Ping had taken out a jade crystal bottle and said, "Inside this bottle is an amethyst vitality augmenting pill. It's a pill that I modified using amethyst honey to restore true essence. Take it and restore your true essence as soon as possible. Since it's impossible for us to have too many harvests, then we must refine all of the growing soil in this spirit grass garden." Debeo pitifully took the jade crystal bottle from Lu Ping's hands. Seeing Lu Ping's stone-hearted expression, he could only sigh. He poured out a sweet and fragrant pill from the jade crystal bottle, swallowed it, and began to refine it. In the blink of an eye, Lu Ping and the others had stayed in the Ingtian dojo for 2 days. During these 2 days, Debeo once again displayed his innate ability, condensing a second piece of growing soil the size of a thumb, and gave it to Lu Ping. At this time, Lu Ping was standing in front of a building that was covered by the light of a restriction spell. After 3 days of investigation, Lu Ping had finally found 5 areas where the power of the restriction spell was the weakest. Perhaps because these 5 areas were hidden very well, and Qingjian Laozu was obviously not very good at breaking restrictions, they were not found and broken by Qingjian Laozu. However, Lu Ping believed that he only had a 20% to 30% chance of breaking the restriction spell in these 5 areas, even if he went all out. At this moment, there was a sudden explosion behind him. Lu Ping suddenly turned around and saw Debeo running over excitedly, shouting loudly, "Boss, come and see what I found." Lu Ping's heart skipped a beat, and he turned around to follow Debeo. Lu Ping looked at the cave in front of him and asked curiously, How did you find this place? It turned out that when Debeo was preparing to condense the growing soil in the spiritual herb garden for the third time, he suddenly discovered that the spiritual energy in a corner was a little weak. That corner was an area that Qingjin Laozu had opened up after they entered the dojo. Lu Ping originally thought that even if there were treasures there, they would have already been plundered by Qingjin Laozu, so he did not carefully investigate it. Unexpectedly, Debeo found some clues here. When Lu Ping arrived, Samling and Lu Qiner had already worked together to break the restriction spell at the entrance of the cave. The structure of this restriction spell was relatively simple, and it was not connected to the other restrictions. It seemed to have been set up temporarily, but it was broken so easily. A familiar spiritual energy fluctuation came from the cave. Lu Ping was surprised with a trace of disappointment, and he said, "A spirit stone vein? I didn't expect a spirit stone vein to move into this Ingtian dojo, but we can't take this vein away." Debeo was most fond of treasures that contained spiritual energy, such as spirit stones. After Lu Ping confirmed that this was a spirit stone vein, he could not wait any longer and said, "Boss, let's go down and take a look first?" Lu Ping pondered for a moment and said, "All right." Spirit stone veins could be regenerated, but the regeneration period was extremely long. 3,000 to 4,000 years would be enough for this spirit stone vein to return to its original state. Lu Ping and his 6 spiritual pets worked together. 2 hours later, they looked at the small pile of spirit stones in front of them. Lu Ping took out the few high-grade spirit stones and said, "Looks like this is a medium-sized spirit stone vein." Although the ratio of high-grade spirit stones is not as good as the one on Frost Island, it's still not bad. Unfortunately, if Guotian Shan Laozu also came to the Middle Earth, with his current ability to move mountains and fill seas, he could work together with Jiang Tianlin Laozu and Senior Uncle Xinshin, who is a formation grandmaster. Then, they might be able to move this medium-sized spirit stone vein. We are powerless to do anything at the moment. Debeo wanted to dig in the spirit stone vein first, but time was limited. With Lu Ping's current net worth, he did not care about the tens of millions of spirit stones, so he asked Lu Qiner to pull Debeo's beard and pull him out of the spirit stone vein. After Debeo handed the third piece of breathing soil to Lu Ping had already surveyed the area where the restriction fluctuation was the weakest. He already had a plan in mind, so he called all 6 spiritual pets over, and then directly flicked a drop of core forging stage royal jelly into Debeo's mouth. This drop of royal jelly made Debeo's chubby face red, and allowed him to quickly recover his Zhen Yuan. After thinking for a while, Lu Ping also called out the Amethyst Bee King, Zilan. Lu Ping could not dissolve the restriction invisibly, so he could only use a 2-pronged method of cracking and breaking. Therefore, Lu Ping could only gather everyone's strength and try to increase the power of breaking by force. Chapter 628. The restriction that Lu Ping and the others were facing was emitting a rainbow-colored light. Lu Ping's hands formed a series of hand seals. Rays of blue and purple light flashed in his hands and then shot towards the rainbow-colored restriction. As Lu Ping cast out the hand seals, the light on the barrier's surface gradually weakened. First, it turned into 6 colors, then 5, then 4, and finally, when it reached 3 colors, it finally stopped moving. "Now!" Lu Ping shouted, and the 3 spirits reacted first. As if they had a telepathic connection, they used the wind to strengthen the water and the water to form ice. The wind whip, water halberd, and ice arrow all rushed towards the tricolored seal at the same time. After Samling consumed the heart-dissolving pill refined by Lu Ping, he was now at the 3rd layer of core forging. Samling was a top-ranked demonic beast. Even a 5th or 6th layer core forging cultivator wouldn't dare to underestimate this attack. After the explosion, the 3-colored restriction became a lot dimmer. However, in the end, it wasn't able to reduce the 3-colored restriction to only 2 colors. At this time, Lu Qiner also made her move. Lu Qiner had already advanced to the 4th stage of core forging, and after refining the wind and fire dual attribute spirit items, her strength had increased tremendously. This time, she deliberately let the 3 spirits attack first because she wanted to see how strong she had become. A pair of flywheels suddenly appeared in Lu Qiner's hands. One was azure, and the other was fiery red. The two wind wheels smashed into the restriction one after the other. Finally, the three-colored restriction was reduced to two colors. Lu Qiner giggled and proudly looked at Samling. At this time, Lu Dague's attack arrived. A huge fist condensed in the sky. Then, he used his own life treasure refined from his tortoiseshell to form a glove and fiercely smashed down. Although it looked very powerful, in reality, it was not as powerful as any one of the Samling. As for Debeo, he barely managed to shoot out an earthen yellow true essence, which condensed into a boulder in midair and smashed into the light screen. It could be considered as doing his best. Although Debeo and Dague were both at the first layer of core forging, the difference in strength between Debeo and Dague was too great. Just before the boulder fell from the sky, a sound like the gurgling of water soared into the sky. A huge silver sword slashed down. Poochie. As if chopping melons and vegetables, the remaining two colored lights were suddenly cut down. Then, a sound like silk ripping could be heard. The thing hidden behind the restriction finally appeared in front of Lu Ping and the others. After Lu Ping refined the Changlu sword, it showed great power. It was worthy of being a spirit-nourishing treasure with 8 treasured restrictions. Its power was many times more tyrannical than the golden scale sword. With just one strike, it completely broke the restriction. Unfortunately, the Changlu sword and the thin water sword formed a set of dual flying swords. This was the only way to display the true power of the Changlu sword. Now, Lu Ping could only use the Changlu sword as a single sword. Although its power was still tyrannical, it was not able to display the full potential of the Changlu sword. Lu Ping had a strange expression as he looked at the bronze furnace in front of him. Was this another incense burner? Compared to the small stone cauldron Lu Ping found in the stone room that was used to control the cave dwelling's array formation, this copper cauldron was much bigger. But Lu Ping didn't know why this incense cauldron was placed here. When Lu Ping opened the incense burner, he was a little surprised. The incense burner was made from a spirit material called fiery wind copper. Although the fiery wind copper was not as precious as the 1,000 sand copper, it was still a common material used to forge high-grade cauldrons and mystic instruments. But in Ying Tian sect, it was forged into an incense burner. There was still a large amount of incense left in the incense burner. Lu Ping picked it up and sniffed it. He found that it was a large amount of soul-calming incense. Although soul-calming incense was not as expensive as soul-calming incense, it was still a consumable used by high-grade cultivators to aid their cultivation. Lu Ping had seen this incense in Lu Tianling's Chonghua Palace before, but that was after Lu Tianling and Lao Zhu entered the transcendent stage. Lu Ping held the incense burner in his hand and looked at it. He found that there was a drawer-like object at the bottom of each of the 4 sides of the incense burner. Lu Ping's eyes lit up and he opened the first drawer expectantly. There were 25 pieces of soul-calming incense neatly arranged inside. Although there were not many of them, each of them was very heavy. After igniting them, they could burn for 7 days. They were suitable for a cultivator to use during a long period of seclusion. Lu Ping opened the second drawer and saw a total of 20 pieces of calming soul incense. However, these 20 incense sticks were much larger than the 30 he had before. Each incense stick could burn for 7 days. Obviously, they were also prepared for long-term closed-door cultivation. Lu Ping opened the second drawer and saw 20 pieces of calming soul incense. Lu Ping looked at the third drawer expectantly. Among the precious spices commonly used in the cultivation world, the soul-calming incense, and soul-nurturing incense were the most famous. Among the 3, the soul-calming incense was the least effective. The soul-calming incense was a notch better than the soul-calming incense. The most valuable was the soul-nurturing incense. Not only was the soul-nurturing incense more effective than the soul-calming incense in gathering one's consciousness, nourishing one's divine will, and healing injuries, but the soul-nurturing incense also had many rare benefits for a cultivator's divine will. With a glimmer of hope, Lu Ping opened the third drawer. As expected, there were 12 pieces of soul-nurturing incense inside. Lu Ping was overjoyed. The soul-nurturing incense was highly sought after by some Dharma adepts in the cultivation world. It was said that the soul-nurturing incense had an obvious effect on stabilizing, strengthening, and recovering one's Dharma power. Although what he found in the first 3 drawers was unexpected, Lu Ping felt that it was worth it. What was in the last drawer? Among the precious spices in the cultivation world, although these 3 spices were the most famous and had the most uses, it did not mean that these 3 spices were the most valuable. In the cultivation world, there were some spices that were not as widely used as these 3 spices, but they had unique effects that were amazing. Lu Ping opened the 4th drawer with a heart full of anticipation. However, his enthusiasm was met with a bucket of cold water. Incense ash. How could he have forgotten about this? Lu Ping smiled bitterly and shook his head. This drawer was used to store the incense ash left after the spices were burned. Lu Ping put away the incense burner and then looked at the area where the restriction had been opened. It was obviously a relatively remote corner. Except for the incense burner in the corner, the other places were empty and there was nothing else. No wonder the restriction here was the weakest. The 6 spiritual pets, who had launched their strongest attacks, rested for a moment to recover the inner yuan in their bodies. Then, they followed Lu Ping to the second restriction that looked weaker. This time, Lu Ping had only broken 3 of the colorful restrictions. Samling and Lu Qiner had only broken 1 when they joined forces. The remaining Dabao, Dague, and the amethyst wasp king Zilan had only barely destroyed half of the colorful lights. However, what surprised Lu Ping and the others was that the 49 stingers sent out by the amethyst wasp king Zilan had a special effect on breaking restrictions. The half of the light that the 3 of them had destroyed was mostly thanks to Zilan. Unfortunately, the amethyst wasp king's cultivation was too low. It was not even comparable to Dabao. Otherwise, Zilan might have become Lu Ping's secret weapon to break the restriction of Ingtian Dojo. However, this was already enough. The long stream sword once again turned into a gurgling stream of water, and then into a monstrous wave that surged into the sky. Wave after wave, the long stream sword smashed 1.5 rays of colorful light in one fell swoop. Then, the landslide sword fell with the force of a thunderbolt, smashing the last ray of colorful light until it was on the verge of collapse. This was not the end of it. Before the Changlu sword could be retracted, the golden scale sword had already streaked across the sky with a golden shadow, becoming the last straw that crushed the restriction. After the restriction was broken, Lu Ping shouted, "Oh no!" It turned out that Lu Ping did not know the depth of the restriction's protection just now. After breaking the last colorful light restriction, the golden scale sword did not stop. It passed through the restriction and smashed a house that was protected by the restriction into pieces. The moment the restriction was broken, there was a loud bang, and the house became a pile of ruins. Lu Ping looked at the several jade slips that had been smashed by the sword chi in the ruins. He did not know how many inheritances could not be obtained because of this sword. Lu Ping and the 7 pets dug through the ruins and found a total of 58 jade slips. Among them, 27 were directly shattered by Lu Ping's sword chi or were smashed when the house collapsed. The remaining 31 jade slips were intact. Similar to the inheritance of the Ingtian faction found in Lao Tzu's cave abode in the clear stream, the contents of the inheritance in these 31 jade slips were more extensive. It involved cultivation, magic arts, secret techniques, alchemy, weapon refinement, talisman making, puppet making, and many other aspects. However, each aspect was only a part, and the contents were not complete. It was obvious that there were other places of inheritance. Only by gathering all these jade slips together and sorting them out would one be able to obtain the complete inheritance. Looking at the 27 jade slips that had shattered on the ground, Lu Ping sighed. He did not know if the contents of these shattered jade slips were important or if they would have a great impact on the complete inheritance system of the Ingtian faction. Not bothering to browse through the contents of the inheritance jade slips that he had obtained, Lu Ping hurriedly walked towards the next location. This time, while Lu Ping was breaking the restriction, he discovered that this restriction could actually borrow the power of ice from the entire Ingtian faction's formation. Lu Ping immediately activated the red spirit flame. Under the activation of Lu Ping's true yuan, the earth high-grade spiritual fire of heaven and earth suddenly exploded into a ball of red light. Under Lu Ping's control, the red light transformed into a strange burning dragon. It circled around the restriction that was emitting the power of ice. After roasting it for half a day, the restriction was finally completely broken. In the grassland behind the restriction, DeBeo dug out 3 jade boxes that had the spirit sealing talisman stuck on them. However, he did not find anything else after that. But now that he had a talisman weapon in hand, DeBeo's first-layer core forging cultivation could temporarily alleviate the awkward situation of not having a life-bonded magic treasure and his own weak strength. When the second box was opened, Lu Ping's eyes lit up, and a trace of joy quietly crept up his brows. Restriction-breaking talisman. Lu Ping was feeling extremely regretful because he couldn't break the tyrannical restriction in the Ingtian dojo. Countless treasures were right in front of him, but he couldn't get his hands on them. He didn't expect that a restriction-breaking talisman would immediately appear in front of Lu Ping. Lu Ping had also obtained a restriction-breaking talisman from the auction, but it was the lowest kind of restriction-breaking talisman. At that time, Lu Ping only used it to open the seal of the mysterious purple jade slip that he obtained from Failing Island. This restriction-breaking talisman was emitting 5 colors, and it was unknown how many levels higher than the talisman that Lu Ping had seen before. With this talisman in hand, Lu Ping was confident that he could break the restriction that he had previously sighed at. Perhaps he would be able to obtain some surprising harvest from it. What would be in the third box? Counting one's own harvest was undoubtedly an exciting thing, not to mention that when these harvests were obtained, there was more or less a lot of suspense mixed in. Lu Ping looked at the 7-colored talisman in the box in disbelief. The 7-colored restriction-breaking talisman was said to be a top-grade talisman that could be broken by any cultivator, as long as it wasn't a spirit transformation realm expert that had reached the true spirit realm. If DeBeo's previous statement that Xianju Daoist had heard that Lu Ping had fused the storage talisman with the talisman treasure, greatly increasing the talisman treasure's power, then if Lu Ping had given this 7-colored restriction-breaking talisman to Xianju Daoist, then not only would Xianju Daoist be killed, but the pavilion master of the Jinling Talisman Pavilion, Tian Shuelaozu, would also be killed. He never thought that the Ying Tian sect would have this kind of talisman passed down. The inheritance of a large sect with a long history was truly not a small matter. Lu Ping placed the 2 talismans back into the box. Then, he carefully stuck the spirit sealing talisman on the box and solemnly placed the 2 boxes back into his storage ring. The 4th 7-colored restriction was becoming more and more difficult to break. Lu Ping used all the seals he knew to break restrictions to the extreme, but his cultivation limited the power of the restriction. In the end, the 7-colored restriction only had 5 rays of light left. Even with the 7 spirit pets working together, they were only able to destroy 1 ray of light. Of the remaining 4 rays of light, 2 were destroyed by Lu Ping's flowing sword and golden scale sword. Then, the landslide came crashing down and destroyed another half-ray of light. Just when DeBeo and the others were feeling a little discouraged, they saw a sudden clap of thunder above Lu Ping's head. A thunderbolt fell down and shattered the remaining half-ray of light in one fell swoop. DeBeo cheered and was the first to run into the place that was previously sealed by the restriction. However, after a moment, DeBeo walked out dejectedly. He looked at Lu Ping bitterly and said, "Boss, go in and take a look. All the good stuff has been turned into charcoal by your thunderbolt." Lu Ping scolded in annoyance, but he still walked in. This was a half-buried building. There were many body parts made of various spiritual materials. There were also a few assembled into human or beast models. However, most of them had been turned into charcoal by the thunderbolt of the 7-treasure thunder calabash. Lu Ping said with some surprise, "This is the place to make puppets? Let's find out if there are any ancient books about making puppets." Everyone turned the building upside down. They almost broke every brick to see if there was anything hidden in the hollow bricks. Unfortunately, they still found nothing. Daguay, on the other hand, found a small, but complete puppet from a pile of broken puppet limbs. Lu Ping took the puppet and carefully examined it. He said with some surprise, "This puppet is made of second-class mutated spiritual materials. It seems the quality is quite good. No wonder it was intact after the thunderbolt. I don't know what use this puppet has. Lu Ping touched the back of the puppet's head and opened a hidden groove. He smiled and said, "It really is good. It actually needs a high-grade spirit stone to activate. Its power is no less than that of a core forging cultivator." As he spoke, he placed a high-grade spirit stone into the hidden groove. Following a series of creaking sounds, the puppet's body transformed into a 3-foot-tall silver pony. Surprisingly, there was a half-foot-long horn on the top of the pony's head. Because the puppet had not been refined, after Lu Ping used a high-grade spirit stone to activate it, the single-horned pony began to run around the house. Lu Ping thought for a moment and turned to look at the amethyst wasp queen. He saw the petite amethyst wasp queen Zilan flying out from a pile of rubble with a dusty face. In her hands was a book that was half the size of her. Lu Ping looked at the book in her arms and was happy. He smiled and said, "Little Zilan, how did you get yourself into such a mess?" However, after the purple crystal bee king flew out from the rubble, its eyes were immediately attracted by the single-horned horse that was running around in circles. With a cheer, it threw the big book in its arms to Lu Ping and landed on the horse. It excitedly pulled on the horse's reins and shouted, "Hiya! Hiya!" Lu Ping smiled and taught the Purple Crystal Queen be the method to refine puppets. He then gave her 50 high-grade spirit stones and let her ride the pony. Lu Ping looked at the large book in his hand with a rather strange expression. The Ying Tian sect's inheritance arrangements in the dojo were indeed a little strange. Putting aside the fact that they had messed up all the books and randomly scattered them, the dojo was obviously a place for making puppets. Yet, Lu Ping and the others found an inheritance book about making charms in the dojo. Lu Ping was speechless as he skimmed through the book. He found that it recorded some high-level talisman-making methods. What made Lu Ping happy and depressed was that he also found the method to make talisman-breaking talismans. Moreover, the inheritance of this talisman-making method was considered common among the big sects in the world of practice. Only those big sects with a long history would have the inheritance of a 5-colored talisman-breaking talisman. As for the inheritance of a complete 7-colored talisman-breaking talisman, only those big sects would have such a heritage. It could be said that although the Ying Tian sect's talisman inheritance book that Lu Ping had obtained was not complete, the value of the talisman-breaking talisman alone was comparable to a complete inherited technique that could be practiced to the late Dharma stage. However, what made Lu Ping a little frustrated was that the inheritance of this talisman-breaking talisman was extremely profound. It was not something that Lu Ping could master right now. Moreover, even if he had mastered the inheritance of the talisman-breaking talisman, with Lu Ping's current level of practice, he could only make a 4-colored talisman-breaking talisman. Moreover, to make a talisman was not something that could be completed in a short period of time. Although this kind of high-level talisman could not be compared to refining weapons, it would take a few days or even a month of effort to successfully make it. DeBeo looked at the bright light that shot up into the sky from the 5th 7-colored talisman and said to Lu Ping with uncertainty, "Boss, why don't we use the 5-colored talisman-breaking talisman that you obtained earlier for this one?" Lu Ping shook his head and pointed at the training ground that was covered by countless talismans in the distance. He said, "We are still at the outermost area of the training ground, and the places that we see are usually only covered by one 7-colored talisman. The other places that are covered by 2, 3, or even more talismans are obviously the more important areas of the Ying Tian sect. If we use this 5-colored talisman-breaking talisman on the outermost area, that would be too much of a waste." DeBeo said with some disbelief, "No way, boss. You still want to go further in? That place is not like the outer areas that are just waiting for us to break the talismans. The talismans in that area are very complicated, and if we move one part, we might be attacked by the formation." Chapter 630. Although DeBeo said that it was difficult, in reality, among Lu Ping and the others, he was the most obsessed with the treasures in the Ying Tian sect's training ground. When he heard that Lu Ping only had the confidence to open 5 restrictions, he secretly sighed. Unlike Lu Ping, when Lu Ping explored the Ying Tian sect's training ground, He first considered how to improve his own strength and whether it could be of help to Lu Ping's training ground in the future. Only then would he consider how to use the gains from the Ying Tian sect's training ground to strengthen Jinling. Otherwise, he would not have rushed to the northern ice plains from the North Sea before Jiang Tianlin and the other Dharma adepts of the North Sea arrived and entered the Ying Tian sect's training ground. On the other hand, Debao was naturally interested in all kinds of treasures. He did not care whether some of the treasures would affect his training and strength, nor did he care about the use of these treasures. He only cared about the process of searching for the treasures and the treasures themselves. He only wanted to keep all the treasures for himself. This fifth rainbow restriction, under the guidance of Lu Ping, could only cut off one ray of light in the end. However, to Lu Ping's surprise, this time, the 7 spiritual pets actually managed to cut off one ray of light. This time, the greatest credit was due to the horn on the head of the puppet horse that the purple crystal queen bee was riding. After the purple crystal bee king shot out its 49 stingers, the puppet horse, under Zi-Lan's command, used its horn to collide with the 6th ray of light that had been mostly destroyed. Unexpectedly, the horn had some effect on breaking restrictions, and the puppet horse's attack was no weaker than the 3 spirits, so it was able to completely destroy the 6th ray of light in an instant. It was a pity that these restrictions were based on the formation. If they could not be broken by continuous attacks in the first place, then this restriction would quickly recover under the support of the formation of the Ying Tian sect. The flowing sword, the golden scale sword, the netherwater sword, and the landslide sword hit the restrictive spell almost at the same time, but they were only able to extinguish 2 beams of colorful light. The 7 treasures Thunder Calabash released another thunderbolt, and another beam of colorful light was destroyed. The remaining 2 rays of light were still shining brightly, as if mocking Lu Ping and the others for overestimating themselves. The 7 spiritual pets all looked at Lu Ping with some disappointment, but they saw that a 9th tier white jade lotus had risen under Lu Ping's feet. Around the white jade lotus, 12 fist-sized pearls exuding colorful light surrounded Lu Ping's body and slowly rotated around the white jade lotus. Lu Ping's expression was solemn. He slowly raised his hands, and the 12 gentian pearls around him rotated faster and faster. Then, Lu Ping suddenly pushed his hands forward and shouted, "God strike!" The 12 gentian pearls all collided with the 2 beams of colorful light, and in a moment, the remaining 2 beams of colorful light were smashed into pieces. Looking at Lu Ping, who had put the natal gentian formation back into the core space, the 7 spiritual pets were inexplicably shocked. Lu Qiner was the fastest, jumping and shouting, "Brother, you are the best." Samling looked at Lu Ping with complete admiration. Dagui's eyes were wide open, and the amethyst queen bee on the puppet horse covered her mouth with her small hand, as if she was about to exclaim. Debao smiled bitterly and said, "Boss, is this the power of your natal magic weapon? I didn't expect you to have such a trump card in your hand. No wonder you are confident not to use that restriction-breaking talisman. It's just that the power of this natal magic weapon is too great. Your 7 treasures Thunder Gourd can only destroy 1 beam of colorful light, but this natal magic weapon can destroy 2 beams of colorful light so easily." Although Lu Ping's Jinqi was abundant and almost invincible among cultivators in the same realm as him, Lu Ping had used the flowing sword, the golden scale sword, the water nether sword, the mountain crash, and the 7 treasures Thunder Calabash almost at the same time. In addition, he had also cast the natal star array. All of these consumed a large amount of Jinqi, and even Lu Ping felt his body getting weak. Lu Ping operated the Jinqi in his body, and after a while, his slightly pale face was much better. Then he said to Debao, "Don't talk nonsense, go and see what's inside." Debao no longer had time to admire Lu Ping's bravery, and quickly turned and ran towards the open space. At this moment, a whirlpool suddenly appeared above Lu Ping's head. The whirlpool gradually expanded and gradually formed a space portal. A suction force came from the whirlpool, as if it wanted to expel Lu Ping from this space. Lu Ping's expression changed, and he didn't have time to remind Debao. He ran straight into the open space, shook his sleeve, and put away Debao and the things he had just found. Just as Lu Ping put away Debao, Lu Ping could no longer resist the suction force of the open space portal. He had no choice but to fly towards the portal in the sky. Next to the altar outside the Ingtian dojo, a space portal suddenly appeared, and Lu Ping jumped out from it. As soon as he landed and turned around, the portal had gradually shrunk. When the portal finally disappeared, Lu Ping saw the cross-section next to the altar. There was a dark groove on it, and a grayish clay pot was placed in it. Lu Ping removed the clay pot and found that there was no longer a drop of water in it. There was also no trace of water on the entire altar. Lu Ping muttered to himself for a moment, and then placed the clay pot back into the source of the abundant river. He filled it with water again and placed it back into the groove. However, there was no more movement from the altar. Lu Ping waited beside the altar for a moment and found that the altar was no longer moving. Regretfully, he removed the clay pot and flew down the abundant river, heading towards the cave that Lao Tzu had opened up in the cave. The water of the abundant river slowly flowed down from the source, and after many tributaries converged, the originally rapid river began to become deeper. About 10 feet below the river, the blue water moon pearl was suspended above Lu Ping's head, forming a shield. Lu Ping sat cross-legged inside the shield, recovering the large amount of true yuan that he had consumed. After continuously using his full strength, especially using several spirit communication and even spirit nurturing grade treasures at the same time, Lu Ping's true yuan had been greatly consumed. Although Lu Ping had refined 2 portions of the Wonder Dew when he had advanced to the late stage of core forging, causing his true yuan's recovery speed to greatly increase, such an intense consumption of true yuan still required a lot of time for Lu Ping to recover. Lu Ping didn't expect that he would actually stay in the Abundant Heavens Sect's training ground for 5 days. After entering the Abundant Heavens training ground, they first gathered the spiritual herbs and Debeo refined the growing soil powder from the spiritual herb garden. This alone took them 2 days. After that, everyone worked together to break the 5 rainbow-colored restrictions, and it took them another 3 days. In addition to the fact that Lu Ping had already been in the northern ice plains for 8 days, a total of 13 days had passed. Lu Ping had previously thought that the various sects Lao Tzu of the Northern Sea would arrive at the northern ice plains in about half a month, but that was only a guess. Now that the time was almost up, he didn't know if the various sects Lao Tzu had already arrived or not. At Lu Ping's cultivation level, there was no longer a need to deliberately maintain a state of closed-door cultivation to recover the true yuan in his body. As long as he could maintain the normal circulation of his body's cultivation technique, it would be fine. Lu Ping was still floating in the air within the Jade Water Moon Pearls barrier. However, his tightly shut eyes had already opened. Then, with a shake of his sleeve, he placed the few items that he had discovered after breaking the 5th rainbow-colored restriction in front of him. This time, Debeo had only discovered 4 items. At that time, he had been in a rush, and the spatial door of the Abundant Heavens training ground had suddenly opened. When Lu Ping saw that the situation wasn't good, he hurriedly put away Debeo. He didn't know if the treasures in the newly opened location had already been found by Debeo. The first treasure was a wooden box that contained a book. At first, Lu Ping didn't know why most of the Ingtian sect's heritage books were in the form of paper books and not jade scrolls. Compared to jade scrolls, paper books were much more difficult to preserve and contain information. Could it be that only the paper books were able to display the sect's profound heritage? Lu Ping didn't understand why Ingtian sect's heritage books were in the form of paper books. However, when Lu Ping saw the title on the cover of this 1-inch thick book, he couldn't be bothered to ridicule the Abundant Heavens sect's inheritance system anymore. Abundant Heavens sect's array formation basics? It was an extremely ordinary name and seemed like a common item. However, this book was the foundation of the Abundant Heavens sect's array formation inheritance. If one wanted to inherit the array formation inheritance of the Abundant Heavens sect, then they could only enter the sect through the contents recorded in this book. Lu Ping roughly skimmed through the contents of the book. Although he didn't know much about array formations, he could still see that this book was extraordinary. Hu Lili had told Lu Ping that Sage Xianxian had once complained that the array formation inheritance of the Xinling sect was not complete. This caused the array formation masters of the Xinling sect to be able to set up extremely brilliant array formations during their cultivation process. However, the progress of the array formation master's own cultivation was extremely slow, and compared to cultivators of the same level, they were much weaker. This also caused the cultivation of array formation masters in the Jinling sect to be extremely difficult. The imperfect foundation of array formation cultivation was one of the main reasons why array formation masters in the Jinling sect had so many drawbacks. In reality, in the history of the Jinling sect, none of the cultivators who chose the path of array formation masters were able to break through to the Dharma stage. It was extremely rare for someone like Sage Xianqin to reach the late core forging stage and become an array formation master. If it wasn't for Lu Ping's strong support, Hu Lily's cultivation progress and strength would definitely not have been able to remain at the forefront of the third-generation disciples. In such a short period of time, she had the possibility of refining low-grade Earth-level spiritual objects and breaking through to the mid-core forging stage. However, it was undeniable that Hu Lily had relied on too many external factors to achieve her current achievements. In reality, Hu Lily had always been extremely conflicted. She was an extremely arrogant person and did not want to become a burden in the eyes of others just because her cultivation was too far behind Lu Ping's. However, the cultivation of array formation masters had always been difficult. In the end, she had no choice but to rely on external factors. This time, before Lu Ping came to the central mainland, Hu Lily was preparing to go into seclusion to break through to the mid-core forging stage. Lu Ping had given her a small forging spirit pill that he had refined himself, just in case. If Hu Lily had this complete array foundation inheritance from a large sect, she would be able to improve her own cultivation method. Then, Hu Lily might be able to go further in the future. Chapter 631. Lu Ping carefully examined the three necklace-like magic treasures in his hand for a long while before saying with some hesitation, "Could this be the demon-transforming bracelet?" Lu Ping shook his sleeve again and released Debao. When Debao came out and saw the surrounding river water, he felt somewhat uncomfortable. But after seeing the jade water moon pearl floating above Lu Ping's head, he relaxed and asked, "Boss, how is the thing we got from the fifth forbidden ground?" Lu Ping didn't say anything and directly threw the demon-transforming bracelet in his hand towards Debao. Debao didn't have time to dodge, and the silver necklace-like magic treasure was already on his neck. Debao lowered her head and looked at Lu Ping with a puzzled expression. Suddenly, Lu Ping's eyes glowed with a green light that was more than a foot long. Clearly, he was casting the three pure one's true pupils with all his might. Seeing this, Debao knew that Lu Ping was most likely testing this necklace-like magic treasure on his body, so he didn't say anything. After a moment, the azure light in Lu Ping's eyes disappeared and a strange expression appeared on his face. He said, "Sure enough, this strange treasure is the demon-transforming bracelet." Debao carefully looked at the demon-transforming bracelet on his neck and asked with some apprehension, "Boss, what is the demon-transforming bracelet?" Lu Ping waved his hand, and the demon-transforming bracelet on Debao's neck reappeared in Lu Ping's hand. He then explained to Debao, "The demon-transforming bracelet is said to be the unique magic treasure of a mysterious sect in the Middle Earth, the Spirit Beast sect. This magic treasure, when worn on the body of a demon, can conceal the demon's foundation and not be detected by human cultivators. It is the most ideal magic treasure for demon cultivators to walk the human cultivation world." Debao's eyes suddenly lit up. He said, "That's so magical. Boss, can you give this thing to me? In any case, boss, you have 3 demon transformation chakrams." Lu Ping put the demonization bracelet on his wrist and said, "Your sense of smell can be considered a special technique among demon cultivators. Do you think I'm a human or a demon?" Debao looked at Lu Ping with some astonishment, but he still sniffed around Lu Ping. A strange expression appeared on his face, and he said in surprise, "No way, boss. Why do I find that you are no different from a monster race cultivator? Although I can't tell what kind of demon cultivator your demon chi is, you do have demon chi on you." Lu Ping took the demonization bracelet off his wrist and said, "Now you understand. This magic treasure that looks like a necklace and a bracelet is called the demonization bracelet in the human race, and the false demon bracelet in the demon race. It means that humans can pretend to be monster race cultivators if they wear it, and monster race cultivators can pretend to be human race cultivators if they wear it. DeBeo immediately understood the value of these three magic treasures. Samling and Lu Qiner were both top monster race cultivators. Before they entered the Dharma stage, it was almost certain that Lu Ping would take them to the inheritance grounds of the two races to receive the last bloodline inheritance of the two races. This demonization bracelet might be of great help to Lu Ping on his trip to the monster race. Looking at these three magic treasures, DeBeo couldn't help but say in surprise, "This is really too magical. I wonder how the spirit beast sect cultivators were able to make such magical treasures." Lu Ping also said with a sigh, "Legend has it that the spirit beast sect is a sect that is jointly controlled by the cultivators of both the human and demon races. No one knows whether the spirit beast sect cultivators who roam the cultivation world are humans or demons. This is because some of the high-level spirit beast sect cultivators wear this kind of necklace magic treasure when they appear in the cultivation world. Because of this, they are afraid of the spirit beast sect, which is a sect that combines humans and demons. Therefore, although the spirit beast sect cultivators rarely appear in the cultivation world, when they do, very few people are willing to provoke them." Lu Ping carefully placed these three magic treasures in his storage ring. Although it had only been 5 days since their trip to the Surplus Heavens sect, Lu Ping and the others had only managed to open 5 of the simplest restrictions despite their best efforts. Lu Ping was already very satisfied with this harvest. Lu Ping followed the flow of the river and was just about to release his divine sense to check where he had arrived. When he looked up, he just happened to see a fishing net suddenly fall from above, covering Lu Ping. Lu Ping was startled, but he immediately realized who was on the surface of the river. He smiled and said, "What a coincidence." Lu Ping casually waved his hand, and about 20 to 30 fish that were swimming past Lu Ping were swept up by Lu Ping. Lu Ping, on the other hand, moved and escaped from the net. When the net was retracted, the 20 to 30 fish had already been dragged up. Suddenly, a young man's surprised voice sounded from the river, "Ha ha, today's luck is not bad. I'll sell these 10 or so fat ones for money to pay for mother's treatment. The rest of the smaller ones can be eaten by myself." Just as the young man finished speaking, a clear and melodious voice sounded, seemingly dissatisfied. Then, he heard the young man say, "That won't do. You have to eat cooked food in the future, not raw food. Mother said that you have to be a human in the future. You can't always be a demon." A strange look appeared in Lu Ping's eyes, but he did not pay too much attention to it. After all, DeBeo had already warned this kid that there should be demons around him, but he did not expect it to be a little demon at the early stage of the blood-refining realm that had yet to mature. Just as Lu Ping was about to return to the rocky cave, he heard a hearty laugh. Lu Ping's expression changed. Then, he heard the young man say happily, "So it's Immortal Kai. This kid pays his respects to the immortal." Then, a voice that Lu Ping had heard on the lone peak of Celestial Mountain was heard. "Little boy from the Dew family, it seems that you've had a good harvest today. How is your mother's illness? I heard that 2 days ago, you invited a disciple from our sect to treat your mother. Has there been any improvement in the past 2 days? I dare not hide this from you, immortal." Du Jialua hesitated for a moment before replying. "Although my mother's illness has improved, she has not fully recovered." "Oh, there's such a thing?" Immortal Kai's tone was full of surprise. Then, he said angrily, "Whose sect's disciple is this?" Not only did he accept spirit stones from mortals, he actually accepted spirit stones from others and did not complete the task properly. When we return to the sect, he will definitely be punished severely. Du Jialua's panicked voice immediately sounded. "Immortal, you can't blame me. It's just that my mother has been suffering from a chronic illness for many years. It's difficult for her to recover." After a while, Immortal Kai's voice sounded again. "Lead the way. I'd like to see what kind of chronic illness it is that even a cultivator can't cure." Du Jialua's joyful voice immediately sounded. Then, "Thank you very much, Immortal Kai. I will return to the village now. Please wait for a moment." Then, the sound of paddling water could be heard. However, Lu Ping's divine sense was currently locked onto a small creature that didn't dare to move. When Kai Yun flew over, this small creature hid under the boat and didn't dare to show itself. For some reason, Kai Yun didn't notice that there was a monster hiding under the small boat. Lu Ping thought for a moment. Then, he stretched out his hand and cut a hole in the barrier formed by the aquamoon pearls. 3 small snakes, green, blue, and white, suddenly appeared in the surplus river. Lu Ping opened his mouth and said something. The 3 small snakes nodded at Lu Ping, turned around, and disappeared without a trace. Looking in the direction Samling disappeared, Lu Ping seemed a bit worried. He placed a palm-sized turtle into the surplus river. Putting aside the fact that Lu Ping had returned to his cave abode along the river, Du Jialua, who was filled with joy, rode towards the Du family village with an even more powerful immortal in his eyes. He didn't notice the strange look in Kai Yun's eyes as he stood at the bow of the boat. The Du family village wasn't small. There were about 1,000 people in the village. Du Jialua's father had died a long time ago, so he was raised by his widowed mother. However, Du Jialua was born with great strength. By the time he was 10, he was as tall as a 13 or 14-year-old boy, and his strength was no weaker than an adult's. During this time, Du Jialua's mother was already suffering from a chronic illness. Thus, the 10-year-old Du Jialua began to follow the hunters in the mountains to hunt and the fishermen to fish in the surplus river. At the same time, he took care of the family's 2 mu of farmland. Because he was born with great strength and was smart, he quickly learned how to hunt and fish. He also took good care of the family's 2 mu of farmland. Thus, in just a year, Du Jialua had his own fishing boat. His family's circumstances also improved a lot. The villagers admired him for being able to support his family at such a young age. They affectionately called him Du Lang. When Du Jialua docked his fishing boat at the ferry and returned to the village, many villagers greeted him when they saw him. However, when the crowd saw Kai Yun following behind Du Jialua, all of them became cautious and respectful. It had only been 2 years since the Surplus Heavens Immortal sect started selecting young men of suitable age to open their bloodlines. Back then, Kai Yun had followed his third uncle to the Du clan village to host the ceremony. The mortals in the village all knew that he was an immortal elder of the Surplus Heavens Immortal sect. However, when they heard that Immortal Kai had come to treat Du Jialua's wife, the villagers all praised the Ingtian Immortal sect's benevolence. However, as Kai Yun followed Du Jialua back to his home, a grave expression gradually appeared on his face as they approached. In a small farmhouse surrounded by fences, there were 3 wooden houses arranged in a triangular formation. One of the wooden houses looked like it had just been renovated, but its door was tightly shut. Du Jialua walked into the fenced courtyard and shouted excitedly, "Mother, Immortal Kai from the Ingtian Immortal sect is here. Your illness will definitely be cured this time." After Du Jialua shouted excitedly, the house in the middle was completely silent. Kai Yun unknowingly stood at the gate of the fenced courtyard. He didn't walk into the courtyard. He looked at the small wooden house in front of him with a gloomy expression. However, he quickly calmed down. A gray talisman had appeared in his half-clenched left hand. Du Jialua looked doubtfully at the wooden house and shouted, "Mother, are you at home? Immortal Kai from the Ingtian Immortal sect is here. Quickly come out and welcome him." However, the wooden house was still completely silent. Du Jialua muttered to himself, "Is she not at home? After father passed away, mother's health has always been poor. She rarely goes out." After saying that, Du Jialua walked to the front of the wooden house and stretched out his hand to push the door open. However, just as Du Jialua's hand was about to reach the door of the wooden house, the door suddenly opened from the inside. A woman in her 30s, with a delicate figure and an abnormally pale face, swayed as she stood at the door. When Du Jialua saw the woman appear in front of him, he couldn't help but stare blankly for a moment. Then, joy appeared on his face as he said, "Mother, so you are at home. Quickly come and see. This is Immortal Kai from the Ingtian Immortal sect. Immortal Kai has just agreed to treat mother's illness." The woman glanced at Kai Yun, who was standing in front of the fence with a smile on his face. She hurriedly walked out of the wooden house and bowed to Kai Yun. She said, "This lowly concubine, Madame Du, greets immortal Kai. It is my great fortune to have troubled immortal Kai to treat this lowly concubine's illness." After seeing Du Jialuo's mother leave the wooden house, Kai Yun's expression became much more relaxed. However, he still didn't put away the gray talisman in his left hand. He bowed slightly and said, "Healing the wounded and dying is the duty of the Yingtian immortal sect. Madam, there is no need to be so polite." Inside the wooden house, Kai Yun casually looked at the decorations in the house and asked, intentionally or unintentionally, "May I ask, madam, is there only madam and your son living in this family?" Madame Du softly said, "Immortal, my late husband passed away 10 years ago, leaving only the two of us to depend on each other." Kai Yun nodded and asked again, "Did madam interact with anyone in the past? Did you have a good relationship with any family?" Madame Du imperceptibly furrowed her brows and said, "My late husband was very friendly with most of the people in the village. After my late husband passed away, this lowly concubine rarely went out to socialize and had little contact with the other families. After Jialua grew up, he was the one who came to greet the people in the village." A strange look flashed through Kai Yun's eyes. He murmured in a voice that only he could hear, "That's strange." Du Jialua didn't know why immortal Kai didn't immediately treat his mother's illness after entering his house. Instead, he asked all sorts of questions and said some things that didn't sound very clear. Thus, he softly asked, "Immortal Kai, how is my mother's illness?" Kai Yun seemed to have a sudden realization and smiled. "When I entered your house just now, I discovered some clues. However, I still have to wait for treatment before I can make a conclusion." Du Jialua hurriedly said, "In that case, thank you very much, immortal." Madame Du looked at Kai Yun and slowly placed her wrist flat. Kai Yun extended a finger to touch her meridian. A wave of Fa Li directly entered Madame Du's blood vessels. Then, it followed the blood vessels and rushed directly to her heart. At the same time, Kai Yun stared closely at Madame Du's expression. However, Madame Du seemed to feel nothing at this moment. Her head was half lowered, but her face seemed to be even paler. Seeing that Kai Yun's Fa Li was about to enter Madame Du's heart, the surging Fa Li would definitely burst her heart and cause Madame Du to vomit blood and die. Kai Yun suddenly pulled back his finger and withdrew the Fa Li that was flowing along the blood vessels to her heart. Then, Kai Yun pointed his finger again. This time, he was seriously feeling Madame Du's meridians. Du Jialua looked at Kai Yun with a hopeful expression. He did not know that in that instant, his mother had already taken a walk through the gates of hell. After a long time, Kai Yun frowned and opened his eyes. He said, "Madame's body is weak. It seems to be a congenital illness. If it was a normal person, they wouldn't have lived past the age of 20. However, Madame has survived until now and even got married and had a child. In the eyes of mortals, this is already unbelievable." Madame Du's pale face smiled. "Jialua is not my son. He was born to my late husband and his ex-wife. After my late husband passed away, I raised Jialua. Jialua is only 12 years old. Now, Jialua is raising this lowly concubine." Kai Yun looked at Du Jialua in shock. Du Jialua asked anxiously, "Immortal, is my mother's illness really that serious? Is there a way to cure it?" Kai Yun could see that Du Jialua did not care if he was Madame Du's biological son. It was obvious that he already knew about this. However, when he thought of the Du family's system, Kai Yun could not help but frown. A congenital illness like this was not incurable in the cultivation world. However, if one wanted to completely cure it, they would have to consume some natural treasures. It was not that the Surplus River sect did not have such things, but it was not worth it to waste such treasures on an ordinary mortal woman. Kai Yun had originally scoffed at the method his third uncle had suggested. Since they were going to abduct someone's child, why would they take care of his parents? Wasn't this the same as being a prostitute and having a chastity memorial? From Kai Yun's point of view, they should just kill the entire family and bring Du Jialua back to the sect. No one would seek revenge in the future. After all, they were just a family of mortals. Thinking of this, Kai Yun's body unknowingly carried a trace of murderous intent. The Du clan seemed to be unaware of it, but Du Jialua, who had been hunting in the mountains all year round, suddenly felt as if his skin was being pricked by needles. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment. He never expected that this highly respected immortal before him would actually want to silence his mother. In the end, Kai Yun still suppressed this thought in his heart. He did not dare to directly disobey the orders of his third uncle, the alchemy master of the Yinghe sect. After pondering for a moment, he took out a jade bottle from the storage bag at his waist and handed it to Du Jialua reluctantly. He said, "This is a secret elixir of our sect. With this bottle of elixir, even if your mother's illness cannot be cured, it will not endanger her life. If this bottle of elixir is used on a mortal like your mother, it can extend her life by at least 30 years. It will be enough for her to die of old age." Although Du Jialua was slightly regretful that he could not cure his mother's illness, he was ecstatic to be able to obtain a bottle of elixir that could extend his mother's life. Du Jialua thanked Immortal Kai repeatedly. Immortal Kai seemed to enjoy the feeling of being worshipped. When he saw that Du Jialua was almost done bowing, he waved his hand and released a ball of magic power to stop him from bowing. Just as he was about to say something, his expression suddenly changed. He said, "Old man was right. There is indeed a demon hidden here." As soon as Kai Yun finished speaking, he disappeared from the wooden house. A shrill scream suddenly rang out from outside the door. Then, Kai Yun shouted angrily in an imposing manner, "What a demon! How dare you appear in the territory under the jurisdiction of the Yinghe sect? The Du clan lady's illness must be related to you. Why are you still not surrendering? Do you want me to kill you directly?" Du Jialua's expression changed when he heard this. He looked at his stepmother pleadingly. However, at some point, the Du clan lady's pale face had turned deathly pale. Her eyes had turned blood red, and she suddenly let out a low growl. Chapter 632. Du Jialua turned pale with fright and said anxiously, "Mother." However, it was as if the Du clan did not hear Du Jialua's advice. A white shadow flashed in front of Du Jialua, and a loud sound came from behind him. When Du Jialua looked over, the Du clan was no longer in front of him, and the wall behind him had been smashed open by the Du clan. Kai Yun's cry of surprise came from outside the house. However, before the cry could fade, it turned into a scream of shock and anger. When Du Jialua heard this, he hurriedly ran out of the house, only to see that the fence surrounding the courtyard had already been torn to pieces. Two figures, one gray and one white, were chasing each other in the air. Every time the two figures passed each other in the air, a series of explosive sounds would be heard. The aftershock from the battle between the two caused Du Jialua's skin to hurt. If not for the fact that his body was different from an ordinary person's, he would have been affected by the aftershock of the battle between cultivators. Even so, Du Jialua did not dare to stay nearby for long. However, he did not leave the center of the battle. Instead, he looked around, as if he was looking for something. At that moment, his eyes lit up, and he scrambled over to the periphery of the battle. Then, he picked up a foot-long silver-white fox from a vegetable garden in the courtyard. At this moment, Kai Yun's scream came from the sky again. When Du Jialua looked up, he saw a gray figure pierce through the ground from the sky, and a rain of blood fell from the sky. The white figure landed on the ground. It was Du Jialua's stepmother, the Du clan. Kai Yun lay on the ground, and the 5 wounds on his left ribs had already stopped bleeding. It was likely that the Du clan had left behind when she had charged out of the wooden house to launch a surprise attack. At this moment, his right shoulder had become a bloody mess, and half of his body was covered in blood. Seeing the Du clan walk towards him with blood-red eyes, Kai Yun's face was filled with panic and fear. He shouted in shock, You're not a human clan cultivator. You're definitely not a human clan cultivator." As he spoke, a gray light suddenly rose from his hand. Du Shi's expression changed, and her right hand formed a claw as if she wanted to extinguish the light. However, the gray light disappeared in a flash, and Du Shi's right hand's fingernail extended 3 inches out of thin air, directly piercing into Kai Yun's core space. Kai Yun knew that he did not have long to live, and the fear on his face instantly disappeared. Before he died, he howled miserably, "Evildoer! I have already sent out a talisman to ask for help. Just wait for the Surplus River sect to kill you." Madame Du's originally pale face instantly turned ashen, and she could no longer hold back the mouthful of blood. When Du Jialua saw that the Du lady was on the verge of collapse, he immediately cried out in alarm, "Mother!" When Madame Du saw Lu Ping running over with the little fox in his arms, an ugly smile appeared on her face. The redness in her eyes faded as she reached out to grab Kai Yun's storage bag. She said, "Good child, we can't stay here any longer. Let's leave quickly. The cultivators from the Abundant River sect are about to arrive." Du Jialua nodded and said with a pained expression, "Mother, let's leave immediately. This time, it's all my fault. I shouldn't have brought these immortals to our house." Madame Du rubbed Du Jialua's head and said, "Child, this is not your fault. You were doing this for my own good." Initially, this Surplus River sect cultivator with the surname Kai could not tell that the bottle of elixirs he took out was indeed effective for your internal injuries. Madame Du chose 2 types of elixirs from Kai Yun's storage bag and consumed them. When she saw that Du Jialua was about to return home to pack up, she hurriedly spat out a mouthful of blood into the grass. She laughed bitterly and stopped Du Jialua. She said, "Luo'er, it's more important to escape now. We can't care so much anymore." Du Jialua immediately came to a realization. He was still hugging the little fox tightly in his arms, but his expression was somewhat confused. He asked, "Mother, where are we going?" Madame Du sighed inwardly. After all, he's only a 12-year-old child. Madame Du glanced at the silver little fox in Du Jialua's arms, and a loving expression appeared on her face. She said, "Let's leave the village first." The battle with that Surplus River sect cultivator just now caused quite a commotion. The villagers are probably scared out of their wits. Du Jialua nodded. When Immortal Kai called him a demon, Du Jialua knew that his family could no longer establish a foothold in the village. Moreover, his adoptive mother had killed an immortal from the Surplus River sect. 2 people and 1 fox left the village. Madame Du took out a silk handkerchief from her sleeve and shook it in the wind. The silk handkerchief immediately turned into a 3-meter-long flying carpet. Du Jialua looked at Madame Du in shock. Madame Du said in a low voice, "Luo'er, hurry up and go up. The Surplus River sect cultivators are probably rushing over now." Du Jialua hugged the little fox and got on the flying carpet. Madame Du laboriously made a few hand seals behind him. A trace of blood appeared at the corner of her mouth again, and the silk handkerchief immediately flew towards the northeast. Less than 10 minutes after Madame Du's family left, a long howl that contained unparalleled anger surged over. Before the howl could stop, a beam of light had already smashed into the entrance of the Du family village. There was a loud bang, and the entire Du family village seemed to shake. The Surplus River sect's alchemy master, Kai Yun's third uncle, stepped into the village and arrived at the fences of the Du family village and the Luo family village. Master Kai's expression was frighteningly gloomy as he looked at Kai Yun's corpse on the ground, whose heart had been ripped out. An invisible pressure spread out from Master Kai to the surroundings of the Du family village. The village was instantly in chaos. Many villagers in their houses knelt in the direction of Master Kai. The 3 wooden houses behind Master Kai collapsed, and the fences outside the courtyard flew in all directions. At this moment, a few beams of light appeared in the sky again. After they landed, a few Surplus River sect cultivators rushed over. Master Kai pointed at the bloodstains on the ground and said in a deep voice, "Kai Yun's murderer is also injured. From the looks of it, the murderer is at most in the late blood condensation realm. Furthermore, there is a faint demonic aura here. Kai Yun's murderer must be a monster." A demonic cultivator actually appeared in a village under the jurisdiction of our Surplus River sect. This cannot happen again. We must kill that monster. The few Surplus River sect cultivators bowed to Master Kai and were about to chase after Madame Du and the others when they heard Master Kai say, "Wait, There might be a 13 or 14-year-old young man among the murderers. His name is Du Jialo. We must capture him alive and not let him be injured. A few beams of light rose from the Du family village and met up with a dozen beams of light that flew over from the direction of the Surplus River sect. These cultivators then split into groups of 3 to 5 and went in different directions to search. Du Jialua stood on the flying carpet and looked at the mountains and rivers under his feet rapidly moving backward. He said happily, "Mother, I didn't expect you to be even more powerful than an immortal." The little silver fox in Du Jialua's arms had also woken up. However, its expression was abnormally dispirited. It curled up in Du Jialua's arms and did not move at all. When it heard Du Jialua's words, the little fox seemed to have thought of something. It did not care about its internal injuries and gently wiggled its furry head. It looked under Du Jialua's arm at Madame Du, who was behind him. Du Jialua could feel the little fox's uneasiness in his arms. He followed the little fox's gaze and looked at Madame Du. He immediately exclaimed, "Mother, what's wrong?" Madame Du's face was as pale as a sheet. However, she was still trying her best to maintain the technique in her hands. When she heard Du Jialua's exclamation, Madame Du could no longer hold on. She spat out a third mouthful of blood, and the flying carpet wobbled and fell to the ground. Madame Du used all her strength to land the flying carpet on the ground. Du Jialua placed the little fox in his arms on the shrunken silk handkerchief. Then, he quickly walked towards Madame Du, who had collapsed to the ground. When Madame Du saw Du Jialua walking towards her, she hurriedly said, "Luo, I can't walk anymore. Hurry and leave with your younger sister. The cultivators from the Abundant River sect will catch up soon. If you want to leave, we'll leave together." The stubborn Du Jialua helped Madame Du, who had collapsed to the ground, up. He prepared to carry Madame Du on his back and leave. Just as Du Jialua carried his adoptive mother, 3 streaks of light suddenly streaked across the sky. A long laugh resounded. "Ha ha, it's here. Evildoer, let's see where you can run to this time." Madame Du, who was originally too weak to get up, suddenly found the strength to stand up from Du Jialua's arms. Her pale face suddenly turned bright red, and she seemed to be in high spirits. Du Jialua hurriedly carried the little fox, who was lying on the ground, and picked up the silk handkerchief on the ground. In the blink of an eye, 3 rays of light appeared. A cultivator in his 30s led 2 other cultivators over. Madame Du looked at them. Although she tried her best to remain calm, her heart was already filled with despair. A core forging cultivator. The core forging cultivator from the Abundant River sect first looked at Du Jialua and the little silver fox in his arms. Then, he carefully sized up Madame Du. There was a strange look in his eyes as he said, "Who are you? Why are you with a demon?" "Humph." Madame Du snorted coldly but did not say a word. She only stared coldly at the core forging cultivator from the Abundant River sect. When the core forging cultivator from the Abundant River sect saw that Madame Du was not speaking, he hesitated for a moment. Then, his expression changed. Suddenly, he snorted coldly, and the aura of a core forging cultivator surged out. He said loudly, "Why are you so rude? Are you looking down on the Abundant River sect?" Previously, Madame Du had used a mystic technique to make the core forging realm cultivators of the He sect appear cautious when they saw her. In reality, Madame Du was already at the end of her rope. Just as the core forging realm cultivators tried to probe her, Madame Du was immediately exposed. She could no longer withstand the spiritual force attack of the core forging realm cultivators of the He sect. She fell to the ground once again, but this time, she could no longer stand up. "Haha, I originally thought that you were a core forging cultivator from some sect, but it turns out that you're a fake. Since that's the case, you can go and die." The core forging cultivator from the Abundant River sect did not expect that Madame Du's core forging cultivator's aura was actually just a facade. He immediately laughed unscrupulously. When he thought about how he was almost deceived by a blood condensation cultivator from Madame Du, he immediately became angry out of humiliation. He pointed his finger forward, and a sword of chi shot out towards Madame Du, who was on the ground. At that moment, Madame Du no longer had any strength to fight back. She could only close her eyes and await her death. However, she still looked to the side unwillingly. Her adopted son and daughter were still there. However, just as Madame Du turned her head to look at her son and daughter one last time, she saw Du Jalua suddenly take out a golden talisman from his robes and tear it. A talisman treasure? Where did Jalua get this talisman treasure? Before Madame Du fainted, she was extremely curious as to why her adopted son would have a talisman treasure on him. Moreover, from the color of the talisman treasure, it was obviously a talisman treasure from a late-stage core forging cultivator. However, the abundant river sect cultivator's cultivation had also reached the core forging stage. How effective could Du Jalua's talisman treasure be? However, Madame Du could no longer see the result of the talisman treasure. Just as the golden talisman treasure in Du Jalua's hand turned into a sky full of golden sword chi and swept towards the abundant river sect cultivators, Madame Du had already lost consciousness. The abundant river sect cultivator did not expect a mortal youth to have a talisman treasure that was obviously from a late-stage core forging cultivator. He also did not expect this mortal youth to be able to activate the talisman treasure in his hand. What was even more unexpected was that this late-stage core forging cultivator's talisman treasure was actually so powerful. Even though the abundant river sect cultivator could tell that the golden talisman treasure was extraordinary the moment Du Jalua took it out, he did not take it to heart. Firstly, it was not easy to activate a talisman treasure. The cultivator's cultivation had to be at least at the blood condensation realm. Secondly, a talisman treasure was extremely powerful against blood condensation realm cultivators, but against an early-stage core forging cultivator like him, it had lost its original power. Even if this talisman treasure was from a late-stage core forging cultivator, it would still be the same. If he was prepared, this talisman treasure might not be able to hurt him. Just as the golden talisman treasure shone brightly, the core forging enlightened master's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the two blood condensation realm disciples behind him might not be able to protect themselves. However, when the sky was filled with sword light that gushed out from the golden light, the core forging enlightened master's expression changed again. He suddenly clenched his hands together, and streaks of green wind spiraled out from his body. Then, they formed a green wind pillar that surrounded the core forging enlightened master in the center. The moment the talisman treasure was activated, the sword light that shot out instantly cut the two blood condensation realm disciples behind the core forging enlightened master into 17 to 18 pieces. However, under the core forging enlightened master's shocked gaze, a sky-piercing sword light suddenly shot out from the golden light that filled the sky. The golden light slashed down, and the green wind pillar was like a piece of cloth that was torn into two by the sky-piercing sword light. When the core forging enlightened master saw that his protective magic treasure had been destroyed, he hurriedly activated his protective earth energy and turned to escape. However, the sky-piercing sword light caught up to him and chopped off half of his left arm and shoulder. It was a pity that this talisman treasure was in the hands of a mortal youth like Du Jalua. If it had fallen into the hands of a cultivator, even the weakest blood condensation realm cultivator, this core forging enlightened master would not have been able to escape death. The core forging enlightened master could not care less about the severe injury on his left arm and shoulder. At this moment, he was already scared out of his wits. There had never been a late-stage core forging enlightened master with such power, unless this talisman treasure was activated by a core forging realm cultivator. That's right, there must be a core forging realm cultivator lying in ambush here. Only then could this talisman treasure be so powerful. When the core forging enlightened master thought of this, he sped up. The blood on his shoulder that had not completely stopped dripping fell into the light and was immediately ignited by a secret technique. His speed instantly increased by 2 times. Du Jalua was at the end of his rope when he remembered the golden paper that Lu Ping had left for him to save his life. As a mortal, how could Du Jalua know that this unusually bright golden paper was a priceless talisman treasure? However, the moment he opened the talisman treasure, the golden sword light that filled the sky and covered the sun dazzled Du Jalua's eyes. The majestic sky-piercing swordlight, under Du Jialuo's incredulous gaze, completely defeated the arrogant current core forging enlightened master of the Yinghe sect. In Du Jialuo's mind, an immortal in his 20s looked at him with an unfathomable gaze when he handed him this talisman treasure. He knew that all of this would happen today. He must have expected it. Du Jialuo wrapped the silk handkerchief into a cloth bag and placed the little fox in it. Then, he tied it to his neck and bent down to carry the dying Madame Du on his back. Then, he walked south towards the Ying River. The immortal who had given him that mysterious piece of paper had traveled upstream from the lower reaches of the Ying River. If he wanted to find these two immortals, he would have to go upstream again. Du Jialuo knew that his adoptive mother and he had both killed the immortals of the Yinghe sect. Now that his adoptive mother, who was originally an immortal, was severely injured, if he wanted to survive the pursuit of the Yinghe sect, he would have to find the two immortals again. After the Yingtian sect was destroyed, the Yingtian dojo went missing. The lone peak of the heavenly mountain where the sect was located was razed to the ground by the forces that had destroyed the Yingtian sect. Other than the Yingtian sect's inheritance that was left in the Yingtian dojo, most of the Yingtian sect's inheritance was divided among the forces that had destroyed the Yingtian sect. However, even a cunning rabbit has 3 burrows. The Yingtian sect's hidden treasure in this mountain range was not limited to the Yingtian dojo. The Surplus River sect, Ying Mountain sect, and Tao Universe sect were the 3 sects that had gradually developed after itinerant cultivators had discovered the treasures left behind by the Surplus Sky sect in the mountain range. They had used these treasures as their foundation. Now, these 3 sects were advancing side by side and had developed into small sects in the cultivation world. Each of these sects was overseen by Adept Laozu. Even so, the Yinghe sect was only a small sect after all. They might not care about the death of a few blood condensation realm cultivators, but when a core forging realm cultivator returned with his shoulder and arm chopped off, the Yinghe sect could not sit still anymore. Moreover, this core forging realm cultivator had been injured by a mortal using a talisman treasure. This was the biggest joke in the world. If news of this spread to the Yingshan sect and the Tao Universe sect, the Yinghe sect would lose all face. Moreover, among the 2 humans and 1 demon that had escaped, the young mortal was someone that the Yinghe sect's Laozu wanted to capture. Although the Yinghe sect's cultivators did not know why the Yinghe sect's Laozu valued a young mortal, the Yinghe sect's only adept Laozu was the Yinghe sect's stabilizing force. Since he had taken a liking to this young mortal, the entire Yinghe sect would not think of anything else. They only wanted to capture this young mortal. If the Yinghe sect's Laozu valued them and gave them some pointers, they would be able to benefit from it for the rest of their lives. Grandmaster Kai immediately sensed the scene of the mortal youth injuring a core forging cultivator of his sect with a treasure talisman. Glancing at the broken limbs on the ground, Grandmaster Kai took 2 steps forward and picked up a torn golden talisman from the ground. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.